this, brother.
All right.
Man, what a catchy tune, man.
I think I've mentioned this before, but I have a friend. His name is Justin Nipper. He actually does some stuff for Noah's U.S. channel, U.S. YouTube channel for Pro Wrestling Noah. But he's also an amazing musician. So I just told him one time, I was like, hey, you remember that old Hogan WCW entrance music? Just replicate that for me. And it took him like a half an hour. And so he knocked it out. So that's Justin Nipper with our intro music there. So what's up, man? We haven't chatted in a month. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Getting ready to go back to work after, as you know, some disclosure here. I took about 5-6 months off. I feel refreshed and ready to go back. Dropped a little weight, which is awesome.
There you go.
And also just been doing a lot of other work. So yeah, just little hobbies, little side stuff that I wanted to do that I hadn't had a chance to do. So I'm ready to tackle it. Get back to the real world. Other than that, I've been watching the MLB race. Right? I mean, both of us have horses in this race.
Your horse is a little bit faster than mine at this point, though.
Well, I thank the good Lord for Gavin Lux finally waking up and playing to his potential, which was very much needed. He avoided the axe for pretty much the entire season, honestly. And so yeah, no, we're rocking and rolling. But it's interesting this year, and I know we always do a little sideswipe over to some quick Major League Baseball talk. Did you know, Garrett Gonzalez? I'm gonna throw a fact for you that I'm sure you already know because you have a baseball podcast.
Yes.
There's no Major League team this year that's gonna win 100 games. Isn't that interesting?
I've been watching the win-losses because I was trying to figure out. At one point, it looked like the Yankees were going to run away and just be the best team in baseball, and then they slowed down. And same thing with the Dodgers. I thought the Dodgers were just going to run away with it, but you guys have so many injuries, especially when it comes to the pitching, that it just makes it hard. And then I was looking the other day, and I was like, wait a second. The Guardians have the best record in baseball. I don't know if they still do, but this was like maybe last week. So there's a lot of all of the good teams, they all have about the same amount of wins. So when it comes to, home field advantage and stuff, there's going to be lots of tiebreaker things that are going to be interesting. But, I didn't realize that the Padres and the Diamondbacks are kind of getting a little close there. Are you guys feeling the heat?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. And again, thankfully, the second half we have a lot of our strong horses coming back from the IL. But still, I mean, I wasn't expecting the Diamondbacks, and there they are. It was the same story as last year, right? They snuck up last year as well.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But as a fan, not so much as a Dodger fan, I always tell my buddies, especially because I have Oracle Park as my second favorite ballpark in Major League Baseball, which actually got replaced this year when I went to PNC for the first time. As I tell my buddies, I'm a baseball fan before I'm a Dodger fan, and it's always going to be that way. I like this. It shows that more teams are in the race, right? It shows that there's not that dominant team. So whenever teams are that close to each other, I think it's better for the sport. It gets more cities involved and whatnot. I mean, even the A's. I mean, even with the way they've been treated. I mean, they're having a decent year too. And so yeah, there's a lot of good stories this year in baseball. So I'm looking forward to see how it ends.
Well, I will tell you that I don't like essentially having a magnet to a 500 record. I absolutely hate it. The Giants will get 3 games above 500, and then they'll lose 3 games, and they'll be right back at 500.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they're playing the White Sox, who are historically bad, but it's not like they're beating the pants off of these guys. They're just like this season has been very frustrating because of how much money they spent. But
yeah, they put the money into the team, and it's not reflective of what's happened in the field.
That's why we have these 3 wild cards per league, is so that teams who just stick around 500 actually have a halfway decent chance if they could get hot late. I don't know if the Giants just have no bats. I don't trust it. I trust that they're going to stick around 500. I do not trust that they're going to break out here and get on a run. They have been waiting to do so all year, and it's just not happened.
Right. Well, there's always going to be a smile on my face whenever that happens to them. So, I mean, I can't help it. It's just so automatic. It's been ingrained.
Yeah, I mean,
but speaking of a year where the Giants were good,
yes, 1989.
Let's go ahead and get on that time machine and go back to the year of 1989, specifically the summer of 1989, which is what we left off last month. So yes. Why don't you go ahead and take it from there?
All right, so we are in the month of July, and the big event in July is the Great American Bash. We're going to talk about the Great American Bash a little bit later. We'll start with WWF stuff. They are heading towards a SummerSlam, their second SummerSlam, and a main event featuring the two key members of the movie No Holds Barred. But before we get there, just to kind of tease the Great American Bash, I think you mentioned this last time. Like for a while, the Great American Bash was like historically like the best pay-per-view or the best VHS that you could actually rent for quality wrestling. When you rewatch it, and I'm sure you've watched it more than just a few times, do you think that holds up to the history of the wrestling that you've watched in your life?
I mean, not anymore. I mean, when you have like the run, it's funny because how do we define pay-per-view nowadays, right? Because when you have the run that New Japan had with those New Year's shows or January 4th shows, I mean, and then also you had AEW, which primarily gives you quality pay-per-views from a work rate perspective. It's hard to say where the Great American Bash 89 stands, but before that, right? Before, when it was just WCW, WWE, and then to a certain extent ECW, the Great American Bash stood the test of time. I would say to maybe like WrestleMania 17. That's where I noticed the conversation started to change, where that replaced Great American Bash 89 as the greatest pay-per-view of all time, and then there was like some ECW ones sprinkled in there. Like I know Heatwave 98 has a big following, but just to include the two big guns, which was WCW, WWE, it was for a long time. Even when you had the great undercard of the NWO era, the Great American Bash 89 always just stood the test of time. It was always considered the greatest pay-per-view of all time. Now I know there was also some nostalgia factor, right? I mean, people just didn't want to let go of that pay-per-view. But I will say this, even in watching it today, it still holds up, man. It's a fun show. Like it's a fun show. And then to me, like when we like the War Games is in the mid card. That's how stacked this show is.
Yeah.
The War Games, which would be a main event in any other time, in any other pay-per-view, it's a mid card match. I think it's like third from the top here. So it's interesting to me how many great matches we got on this show.
I think. Well, let me ask you. So we've seen the Chi-Town Rumble, and then there was the pay-per-view featuring the country, the Oak Ridge Boys that you really enjoyed.
My fave, yes.
And then this one, our back to back. Is the Great American Bash the best of those three?
Yeah, without a doubt. Even if we're missing the Steamboat Flair trilogy, right? It's still without a doubt. Because for those aforementioned shows, some of the undercard, didn't Michael Hayes go like with Jack Victory? Didn't they go like 20 minutes on one of those openers? And it was brutal, Yeah. So
I mean, you had a little bit of Pillman and Irwin.
Not yet. No, that's wrong. Show. Not yet. Oh yeah. But it was Bill. No, this was. Oh, you're talking about this show.
Yeah, this show.
Yeah. I thought you were saying that we had Pillman before this show. I'm like, no, he hadn't come in yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a undercard throwaway match, but it was still Brian Pillman.
Yeah,
and it was like foreshadowing his greatness. I think that was his first pay-per-view. That Great American Bash was his first pay-per-view.
The clash that we talked about the last time. There's just like a video hyping Brian Pillman, and we think about like how wrestling companies do videos today, like WWE is like state of the art everything when it comes to video packages, the way that they do their shots and they intersperse the video and the audio. It's just like A+ all the way through. And AEW is not there, but they can do some pretty creative stuff at times. This video was Brian Pillman doing leg extensions on one of the Smith machines or something like that's
Yeah,
where we
yeah.
were in 1989 for hyping up a guy. All right, so we're gonna push the Great American Bash review to the end of this show. And just for those who are new to this show, basically since January, we've been doing a monthly look at the year of 1989 from the two big U.S. companies, utilizing Dave Meltzer's latest book, the 1989 Wrestling Observers. They are all every single observer from 1989 is in this giant book, and so we've been going weekly and monthly and doing this show. But I wanted to mention this to you. Do you know that? I think I mentioned this to you. 1984 is coming, according to Big Dave.
Yes, you did tell me that, and that's something that we're gonna think about, right?
Yeah, I mean that would be crazy because I have some issues. I think our buddy Big D sent me a few issues from '84. I know that they're probably out there if you can find them, but to have them all official from beginning to end, he wasn't going weekly at that time though, so he was doing like every couple weeks. But when he
Is
told
that
me,
is that
he's
when he
like,
was still covering soccer? I mean, I know he was.
I think so because the earthquakes, the San Jose earthquakes, that would have been right around
Yeah,
that time frame. But he was saying that it wasn't weekly, so he was writing a lot and putting them into the issues. So that'll be interesting. I can't wait for that book to come out. But anyway,
yeah,
so we have, we're basically going through WCW and WWF. We're picking up little odds and ends here, and my favorite segment is only in the Observer, where we pick out some news that you could only find, like no other newsletter or newspaper would have this information. So, and we saved that for the end, only in the
the
Observer.
the that rap group from South Central LA, NWA, that was never gonna be beat. I'll tell you that right now. We could go through, but that one will never be beat.
So, speaking of that, on this YouTube channel, we have a new playlist which features all of the, not all of them. I didn't clip all of them. I just clipped the last 3 months only in the Observer. So if you want to go, if you haven't heard all of our shows, there's a new playlist on this channel, and we'll add, as we continue to do this, we'll add those segments in those playlists as well, because I think it's just a fun look at the time and everything. But this one, they'll have some nuggets, but yeah, I don't think we're gonna beat NWA and what was the other one? Slick Rick. That was
Slick
the
Rick.
other one. Slick
And
Rick.
one of the cool things that has happened organically that I think some of the younger fans could check out is that we always try to make connections to like modern wrestling, right? And where we see AEW, WWE. I mean, because especially at this point, NWA/WCW is very reflective of where AEW is right now. Where
Yep.
they have these phenomenal matches. They have these characters that should be over and should be able to penetrate more to the mainstream, but they just can't for whatever reason. They're stuck, and I think that's where a lot of Dave's wisdom, because Dave tends to use history a lot to make his points, and he's lived through a lot of it. I'm not saying he's old or anything; he's just been around a while, and so to him, it's like, because I know he gets a lot of flack. One of his arguments right now is that WWE is so hot that it's very difficult for number two, right? It's very difficult for the number two company to have any kind of penetration to the mainstream. But he's lived through it, so he's seen that already, and specifically in this era where I know in a few of the observers, he brings that point up how WWE is so hot. I think it's the second week of July where I read that where NWA can literally they can't do anything. Yeah. Like he literally gives up on them, like on prim form, and so it's interesting because I feel like that's, again, there's a connection to today where it's like AEW. Am I hyped up about their upcoming pay-per-view? I'm excited for it because I like AEW, but at the same time, I also feel like I don't know what they could have done to get any more hype, right? They did everything they could. And so, yeah, it's hard to be number two is what I'm trying to say when number one is so fucking hot.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about All In, which is the show that you're talking about, at the end of the show. We don't have a Q&A segment, so we will talk a little bit about All In because I am interested in hearing what you think about the build. I get frustrated. That WWE did some really fundamental angles on Raw. these angles are not going to win angle of the year. They weren't promo of the year. They were just smart and logical. And I just wish AEW would actually lean heavier into the smart and logical, because this Bryan Danielson build is like hurting my feelings. It's like, I want this dude to be like, instead of going in the media and going like, yeah, I'm fine if my career is over. I'm like, dude, you're trying to sell a career-ending match.
Yeah.
Why would you say that?
Yeah.
Like, it's the opposite of promotion. You're
Yes.
basically telling fans that you don't care, so why should they? And I don't understand how that drives interest in the pay-per-view match.
Right. No, I agree with you 100%. It's a big contradiction. I know he's gone on record as saying that he doesn't know how to distinguish the person from the wrestler. And I guess as the person, he feels whatever he's been saying in these interviews, that's how he truly feels. But you're also a superstar wrestler. You have to promote this pay-per-view. So go ahead and play that wrestler role one more time. But let's say, even if he has a hard time doing that, that's where Tony Khan steps in, right? And reminds him, listen, we have to sell this pay-per-view. Because Tony Khan says this, his wacky line every time, right? Every time he does an interview, he finds a way to promote the show, the date, the time. Exactly. And we're very excited. We got this. And it's like, okay, you're in promoter mode. Fine. Everybody does it. Get your guys on the same line then, right? Get them to also promote your show, because if you could do it, so could they, but we've already analyzed the Tony Khan character, his personality. Yeah. Sometimes he has a very hard time like setting some firm boundaries with his talent.
Bryan Danielson, by the way, is kind of like in control of like finding wrestlers and everything too. He should find himself for this bad promotion. A friend of the network, Lady B, said, and he's also made his daughter Birdie the heel in the storyline because she's the one who wants him to retire.
Yes, he's got no accountability by saying, I want to be the best. He's like, oh, my daughter wants me here every so often. And I'm like, what? Now she's the heel,
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. All right, well, we'll come back to that. But we are definitely making.
I mean, the name Birdie makes her a heel in my book, but that's a whole different story.
All right, let's talk about some July in WWF. So, do you remember what you thought of the character of Typhoon when he entered WWF? Because he comes out of we were talking a little bit about Florida because of Dusty and where Dusty was before he came to WWF. And we if you were paying attention back then, you're hearing a lot about this guy, the Big Steel Man. The Big Steel Man. And so WWF has the opportunity to bring him in. And so he comes in, as does Mark Young. Do you remember Mark Young?
I have zero memory of Mark Young. I don't know if I don't even think he ever made it to TV, honestly.
So he had a breakdancing gimmick.
Yes, and I've never seen it. They stumped me right there. I don't know who that was.
Yeah. So he had that breakdancing gimmick in the NWA, and Dave is writing that WWF brings him in, and because of now, this is, we're talking 1989, and we're talking a pro wrestling fan base that is not, is not as, it's probably a lot of the same, a lot of the same type of people watching wrestling and who they're booking for, the majority. And they're not into breakdancing. They probably didn't really care about breakdance, so they bring him into WWF, and I think they immediately have to try and get him to change the gimmick. But the gimmick is why they bring him in, but the fans just don't respond.
So what you're saying is that these are the same kind of people that think the rap group NWA was a fan of the NWA promotion,
yeah,
and they got those initials from them. Okay, I see. I hear you.
But yeah, the Big Steel Man, like the way that Dave is writing about this guy. Obviously, Fred Ottman is who we're talking about. He comes in as, or originally comes in as the Tugboat, but I just like, why don't they bring him in as this gimmick that is really working on the outside instead of eventually coming in as the Tugboat?
Well, I mean, traditionally, right? Like Big Dave, let's use history. Vince ain't gonna support anything that he doesn't create or he doesn't own, and actually. He's lucky he didn't come in as Big Steel Man, because he would have gotten buried. Because one of Vince's Vinceisms is that he likes to make sure that he buries the creations that are not his, right? We've seen it time and time again. Taz is probably the best example of that. And so, yeah, no, I think that was a time, and that time lasted up until he was almost gone, where when you came into his company, you were going to get a new gimmick, you know? Some people, like the Brainbusters, like Harley Race, they got a little tweak, but, you know, they still got something, right? It couldn't have just been Arn and Tully. It had to be the Brainbusters.
Right.
You know, right now we're dealing with the Widowmaker, Barry Windham. So everybody had to come in with a gimmick. And Big Steel Man wasn't a Vince creation, so he didn't care about that. It was like, I could picture the little kids buying little tugboats, you know, those little wacky hats, you know, and you had a grown ass man, you know, going doot doot, and then Gino Gorilla would call him the Tugster, which I always because the thing about, remember, Gorilla would always create a nickname to the nickname, you know. Brutus Beefcake was the beefer, right?
Yes.
Yes. And then you had the Tugster, and so on and so forth. So I remember there was a 1991 Royal Rumble where I don't know if you remember this, but that was when Savage cost Warrior the title, right? And then when it was his turn to come into the Rumble, he just doesn't come in. And then Gorilla's like, once they're around like number 28 or 29, Gorilla's like, well, we haven't seen the toot man. Like Roddy Piper, I don't know how high on coke he was during this time. He just couldn't contain himself. He on the air, he starts belly laughing so hard because he realized how ridiculous it was for a grown man, not only for a grown man to go ahead and say the toot man, right, in a very excitable way, but also for a grown man being reflective of the toot man. So it was like a double-edged sword, and then Roddy Piper just starts laughing hysterically. Like, that was Roderick Toombs. That wasn't Roddy Piper that was laughing. And so I'll never forget that. So yeah. So I mean, Vince was always about merchandising. So he saw big money in a grown, you know, big fat guy coming out as dressed as a tugboat. By the way, one of the most uncomfortable get-ups I've ever seen a man wear, because everything about that suit was so tight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if this guy takes a bump, his pants are going to rip in half. Yeah. Like, even as a little kid, I was always very uncomfortable seeing him wrestle. So to answer your question, yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me whatsoever. Matter of fact, it's expected that he wasn't going to come in as Big Steel Man.
Well, okay, so here's what I would compare it to. Is Dusty saw Big Steel Man as sort of like, maybe not quite as big of a prospect as he saw Big Bubba Rogers. But, you know, Dusty's not gonna build someone up to beat that he doesn't think. Because I mean, that's essentially what Dusty was doing, right? Dusty wasn't building these guys up so that they could be big stars. He was building them up so that he could beat them.
Yes.
But, you know, so Big Bubba Rogers works out, and when Vince brings Big Bubba Rogers over, he's not a hitman or a bodyguard or whatever he was. He's a cop, or he's he's got the nightclub and everything.
He's a security guard from Cobb County, as Bobby
security
would tell
guard.
us.
Yeah, he's security guard. But you know, he's still kind of mean and menacing and a heel. So Big Steel Man comes over, and I'm assuming that there was probably, because I don't remember exactly when he started, but I think it's still like a little while before he actually does start. So from July of 1989. There's some time before he actually does start as Tugboat. So I wonder if there was like this discussion, like, what do we do with this guy? I would have thought like you maybe he's not the Big Steel Man, and I don't even know what the Big Steel Man gimmick was, but doing something serious, because what is the whole thing of WWF in the late 80s? It's setting up heels for Hogan to beat or for Warrior to beat. Mm-hmm. But instead, he comes in as a friend, which I'm assuming eventually he was going to turn on Hogan. But how do you come in as the Tugboat and then become a mean guy off of the Tugboat? Like, you would think you'd come a mean guy first and then turn babyface. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it was weird. And remember, when the Tugster, as Gino would call him, when he turned, he didn't turn on Hogan, which was interesting because in 1990, late 90, they started hooking them up as best friends, you know, to the point that Tugboat was the one that was rallying the support for people to send in their letters so that they could get their little bracelet with Hogan. Did you ever get one of those?
No.
When the Earth, you would already know, you were a teenager by that
Yeah,
point. You were
yeah,
thinking
yeah.
about chicks and all that other stuff. And so yeah, no, yeah. In 1990, Earthquake squashed them because he was off to go make a movie, and then Tugboat was the one that rallied the troops to send in your letter so they could send you that little bracelet. So they had built him up as his best friend, but the turn never came against Hogan. It came against the Bushwhackers of all people, and so they ended up having their blow off at a Coliseum video exclusive. They didn't even have a TV feud. But yeah, that was interesting the way they kind of changed directions. Also, a little known fact about Tugboat: before he became Typhoon, he was Tugboat for, I would say, about a year and a half, maybe. Not one time, other than the Royal Rumble where they need 30 bodies anyway, not one time did he make it onto a pay-per-view. So
Wow.
he never even had a feud as Tugboat. Like, I think he was just doing house shows, and that was a year and a half. I think he might have feuded with Dino Bravo because he was kind of like in Earthquake's corner with the whole Hogan feud, and that's it.
All right. So what else is going on in WWF in July? Well, we mentioned last month that Roddy Piper was back. Roddy Piper is now the co-host of Primetime Wrestling with Gorilla Monsoon, and Bobby the Brain Heenan does his own show. Like, it was like a kind of a pseudo late night gimmick for Bobby. They basically cut Primetime Wrestling down 30 minutes, and then they gave the last 30 minutes to Bobby for his shtick for Primetime Wrestling. That I remember, this isn't that long ago, but when the network came out, there was like this discussion over if the Bobby Heenan show was going to be on some of these primetime episodes, or if we're going to see them again on the network. I never went back and watched them. I remember watching them in real time and thinking it wasn't working. Like, I didn't like Heenan. I didn't like seeing Heenan not get laughs. Like, that kind of bothered me. Some of the stuff he was doing.
I see what you're saying, but I do disagree with you. It was working. If you go back to watch them now, you would have a great time because there was so much insider lingo, and there was so much stuff that was made for the smart marks at the time, that it's hilarious. There's even an episode, and it might have been the last one, where somehow, at that time, famous porn star Holly Hunter, I believe her name was there, an African American gal. And there's a lot of like double entendres and all that stuff. And I'm like, how are they getting away with this? Because she was a legitimate porn star.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was wacky, but I think it was very adult as well, and I think if you were to go back now and revisit them, I think you would get a kick out of them more so than you did back then when you were a kid.
Oh, interesting. So maybe I should go back and rewatch.
Yeah, just not only because of just, Bobby Heenan is burying people, but only you would get it because you were a smart mark.
Right.
He's getting away with using certain language. It was very interesting for its time, and you could tell it was all ad lib because it's Bobby Heenan. That's what he did.
Yeah.
But I think, again, like you said, I think obviously the ratings didn't reflect that, and they ended up canceling it. And then he ended up, they put Piper with Rude, and then he ended up going back to Primetime, which was good because the Gorilla Bobby team is a classic, right? I mean, they have entire compilations on YouTube of just their shtick on Primetime bumpers. And so, by the way, if people ever have time to kill, go check those out because they're hilarious. It's just like the Three Stooges, Albert and Costello kind of comedy, which you don't really see nowadays, but it's awesome. So yeah, people need to check that out. But yeah, I definitely the Bobby Heenan show. If people get to watch it now, I don't think it's on the network, by the way. If they could find it, check it out.
All right, the WWE section of this show is pretty short. The main focus was Saturday Night Main Event, which aired at the very end of July. It was recorded a couple weeks before that. And this was all about setting up the main event, SummerSlam, which is Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake against Randy Savage and Zeus. At this point, Dave still thinks WrestleMania 6, which is already being teased for the Sky Dome, though Dave says, don't believe it yet. It's not a done deal. He thinks it's going to be Hogan and Zeus. So he's probably really surprised at how they book Zeus with Hogan in, as we get throughout the rest of this year. But could you even imagine Hogan and Zeus in a one-on-one match?
No, I can. And I do remember that was the That was a very heavy rumor at that time, and people were scared. Like the smart marks were scared, because it was like that's going to be our main event. Whether there's any validity to that or not, I mean, if Dave was reporting it, there was some of it, right? I feel like there was. So maybe it was just this idea that Zeus just wasn't cutting it, even as limited as he was. Maybe with the house show reports and whatnot, he just wasn't progressing how they wanted him to progress, especially because Warrior and Hogan got like 30 minutes. So you imagine Zeus in that situation. And so, yeah, no, I think they ended up pivoting because people forget, but the Warrior Hogan deal didn't really start till like late January. It was something, it was, and not to say that was odd because at that time, that's how they would do business, but still, it was something unique to where it wasn't this long feud, right? And so it does come off as a pivot to me. Not that I mean, that match wasn't as successful either. You know, that's why they never rematched. And that's something that a lot of people don't know. But it would have been, it was a lot better than Zeus and Hogan. I could tell you that right now.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, going into that WrestleMania 6 main event, there was worry about that match too. And the feedback after the show was over was, oh my God, that was way better than I thought it was going to be. So they did a good job with it for sure.
Except for Dave. Dave is always like Pat Patterson created a miracle with this match. Because remember, it's very hard for Dave to credit Hogan or the WWF. Even here in this month, I mean, he's still doing that, you know, those mental gymnastics to kind of prove that No Holds Barred wasn't as successful as it was. I think towards the end of July, he's starting to come around on it. I think there was a blurb I remember reading where it was like, okay, it was good. I think when he analyzed the idea of them putting it on pay-per-view, right?
Yeah.
He analyzes and he's like, look, if they do that, this movie's gonna make money and it's all good. But I was like, finally, goddamn, everything else. He even has I don't know if you're gonna get to this, but he even has the wacky the theater gets this percentage, and then they get this, and I'm like, Dave, come on, bro. Like, really? I mean,
well, he was trying to flex because he was saying, look, no one else in wrestling is going to understand the movie business like I did. Like I just went to school on the movie business. And basically what Dave was writing was that when the movie was released, the split between the studio and the movie theaters was more towards the movie theater or the studios. But as the release happened, it got almost to where the movie theaters got to keep almost everything and the studio wouldn't get anything. So he said that's how the movie business was. But I will say
he's right. That's how it is. It still is like that to this day.
So when it was done, it was at 15 million or whatever. He did write 15 million is solid, but it's not as big as much of a success as people think. Because if you only want to compare it to this movie that just came out, they did 69 million or whatever.
Pink Cadillac, and I like that movie.
Oh, I thought it was Dead Poets Society. Was it Pink Cadillac?
One of the weeks it was Pink Cadillac. Because remember, he's giving weekly status.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It was interesting because like me and you analyzed last month, we feel that the No Holds Barred investment was worth it, not just for the box office. I mean, even if it was a loss leader, it created Hogan. You know, it gave the illusion that Hogan was the movie star, right? That was the real investment. So I think Vince was smart for doing that. Yes, the movie itself might break even, or maybe it will lose money, but in the big picture, Hogan is now a movie star and he's my guy. And so we came to the conclusion last month that this was a good investment on Vince's part.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know? All right, so Saturday night main event features a Hulk Hogan against Honky Tonk Man match, and this was funny because they're trying to present, or the Honky Tonk Man tries to present himself as the number one contender, and I don't remember that ever being the case because after later in this show, Randy Savage presents himself as the number one contender. So I would guess that Randy Savage was a little bit higher on the rankings than the Honky Tonk Man was, but the Honky Tonk Man in 1989, this is 2 years after his big run as Intercontinental Champion, he's the guy for Hogan to beat on this show. Some smoke and mirrors, but really it's kind of a squash match in a sense, and just nothing but punches and kicks, and I think Hogan kicked out of one of his finishers. But
was it the neck breaker, the wacky neck breaker?
Yeah,
I forget the name of it. It's one of those Elvis puns.
Yeah. Shake, rattle, and roll.
Shake, rattle, and roll. There you go. Shake, rattle, and roll. Yeah. When I saw the lineup for this show, I was like, this is very much like if the internet was around back then, they would totally crucify Vince because they would be like, why is Hunky getting a title shot? He hasn't beat anybody. And it's like, he's just, the opponent of the month. They need somebody to draw a number for Saturday Night's main event, and he just so happened to be that person. And it was a title match, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a non-title. It wasn't a, what do they call it now when if you beat the champion, you get the title shot?
PK calls it the eliminator match.
Yeah, the title eliminator. Which
title
is
eliminator match. Yeah.
Yes. And so no, this was an actual title shot, and I was like, why? Like Hunky has been a pseudo jobber since he dropped the title to Warrior in '88. One of the reasons for that was because he was such a pain in the ass to Vince when he was the champion.
Yeah.
So he ended up doing jobs all the way out till he left the company in 90, I believe. So or 91. So that was kind of weird, It was like, but I guess that's the only guy they wanted to sacrifice to Hogan at that time. I would have loved to seen, if they would have done it right, because they did this with Terry Funk in one of the earlier Saturday Night's main events. If they would have put the Widowmaker in there with Hogan, that would have been awesome.
Yeah. That would have been cool.
Guess at that time they still had plans for Barry Windham, so they didn't feed him to Hogan. So it was just somebody to Hogan could squash, and it's just weird that they made it a title match. But I guess back then you just did that. It wasn't, Hogan wasn't gonna have 9 non-title matches when he was wrestling in a one-on-one.
Right. And my favorite part of this whole thing, they played a video package of Honky Tonk Man's greatest hits. And when we watch wrestling today, and I guess the only person who does this today is Jeff Jarrett. He still has the guitar gimmick. The second his guitar touches somebody, the guitar just explodes. Like it's so gimmicked.
Sometimes it explodes in his hand.
Right. This guitar, Honky hits like 6 dudes.
Not gimmicked at all, brother.
He hits Jake right in the head, and this guitar barely dents.
And that's why Jake became a drug addict, according to him.
According to Jake. Like Honky's hitting these dudes hard with this guitar. Like it's crazy. And then I'm just like thankful that he hits people in the back with some of them, but he drills these dudes right in the head with this.
I didn't see any back ones. I mean, Beaver took it in the head. Jake took it in the head. Warrior took it in the back. Warrior took it in the
Warrior,
back.
And I think Hogan got one in the back too.
Yeah. You don't cost Hogan money, brother, so he's gonna take it in the back. It was surreal to see, right? Because I mean, now we live in this like concussion awareness era, and so seeing that video, and it was the impact of a non-gimmick guitar on another person's head at full blast that was a little surreal to see in with modern eyes. But it got him over. I thought Vince was a genius for doing that because again, you have this guy who's a jobber. Let's make this video package to give him some credibility since he hasn't beat anybody to earn the title shot. And I thought it worked out perfectly.
All right. So Hogan beats Honky. Then there's the wackiest thing on the whole show. To get over Rugged Ronnie Garvin as the referee, he just shows up in the ring before his match is just to shake Hogan's hand. That's what they do to get old Garvin over with the fans to let him know, you're supposed to cheer this guy. Look, he just raised Hogan's hand. So Garvin is the referee for Jimmy Snuka and Greg Valentine. Now, Jack Tunney,
one of our favorites, every time he comes on
the take, he basically publicly shames Rugged Ronnie Garvin for not being able to, for standing up for himself and not being bullied by the wrestlers who want to pick on him, especially Greg the Hammer Valentine. And Jack Tunney basically says, if you put your hands on somebody again, you're suspended. So this entire match is built around Greg the Hammer Valentine versus Superfly Jimmy Snuka, which in 1984 would have been a main event. Here 5 years later, it's terrible.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is Hammer's just trying to sucker this dude into fighting him so that he'll get suspended. And of course, Rugged Ronnie Garvin succumbs to the Hammer, hits him with a right hand. Hammer does the dazed spin around, and Snuka
Right.
hits the splash off the top, and Snuka comes over. Snuka wins one over on Greg the Hammer Valentine.
Yeah, so this was interesting because this was one of those somehow. First of all, Rugged Ronnie got no respect when he came to WWF because he was a former NWA champion. So already he's got a target on his back from Vince.
You know what,
Um,
though? He's really small compared to these guys. I didn't realize that as much just because I knew him from the NWA, but they show him with Dino Bravo, and I'm like, oh my God, like Rugged Ronnie Garvin looks like a cruiserweight compared to Dino Bravo.
yes,
And
and
this
it's
is a
also
time, this is a time when the big guys meant something,
yes, and
more
it's
than they
also
do today.
and it's also a French Canadian, which I would never get over myself for being worked. That when he was in the NWA, being billed from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I fucking fell for it. Um, so for the people that don't remember or don't know or whatever, or Rugged Ronnie comes in and he has a feud with Greg. What happened is that he loses a retirement match against Greg Valentine, and then the gimmick after that is that he starts like fucking with Greg Valentine, doing different other jobs. He was a ring announcer, he was a referee, etc., to the point where Greg Valentine goes right around and it's like tells Jack Tunney, reinstate him so I could beat him, so that was the whole angle, and it culminated in one of the most like surreal matches you're ever gonna see. It culminated in the 1991 Royal Rumble, where they go out there and they have an NWA style match, which was weird. It's violent, it's brutal. It's a chop fest. That's something that we're not used to seeing back in '91 from WWF. But it was a good little feud. So Rugged Ronnie essentially just came in to feud with the Hammer, and then he became a jobber. And so here, we're right in the middle of it, where he does lose his temper, he does interfere in the match, and then he gets fired by Jack Tunney. And then at SummerSlam, which we'll get to next month, he comes back as the guest ring announcer during the Greg Valentine's match, and he proceeds to tell like the worst dad jokes and puns to make fun of Greg Valentine. But we'll get to it next month. So anyway, I like this angle. I'm a big fan of this angle.
Lady B's talking a little politics here. We all miss the days of when we loved and respected the Hulkster. A little rough for Hogan fans these days.
I don't know if my little brain was hip to was wise beyond its years, but I've never been a Hulkamaniac, and I'm very proud to say that. I was always a Ric Flair guy.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, this is where it gets weird for me. I don't think I've ever shared this with you. I was a Bret Hart guy, like in '89. I have shared that with you, right? I mean, and so that, even now, as I reflect on it, I that doesn't make sense to me because he wasn't pushed. He was a tag team guy.
He was like the best underdog guy in WWF for the longest time. It's just
and
like
there was always something cool about him. There was always something cool. Like he was like this silent guy that wouldn't say much, but just the way he carried himself. So around this time in '89, Bret Hart was my favorite wrestler. Him and Dusty. I was never a Hogan guy because I always saw through his shit. Like I know Hogan has always been a heel, even the way he treats his friends in kayfabe. So I've never been a Hulkamaniac ever, and I certainly ain't one now. From where he stands. So yeah.
All right. So the next match was Brutus Beefcake and Randy Savage, and Dave's write-up of this match was just of like utter surprise. He's like, I can't, Vince McMahon deserves so much credit for getting a watchable match with Beefcake in there, and thank God for Randy Savage.
Well, it was Savage, yeah. Savage is the one that got out of him.
Savage was great, and so this entire match was based on the idea that Sherry was trying to interfere, but they couldn't put Beefcake down, and Beefcake, the feud was really about Beefcake versus Sherry, in a lot of the buildup, and so what does Sherry do? Sherry goes to the back and she gets the cleaner. She gets Zeus to come out, and he comes in and he interferes, and there's a disqualification. And so, of course, that leads to Hogan coming out. And this is interesting because the only time that you would ever see, actually, I don't even think this happened with Andre or Bundy, but Hogan would throw the right hand, and Andre would at least kind of like grimace a little bit. He may not take a step back, but he would like feel it. And he threw these right hands at Zeus, and Zeus just smiled. and he did not take a step back. He did not sell it. So this is the first time ever, as far as I can remember, that the Hulk Hogan, the whole punch and kick thing, like absolutely did not work. And he's got to play this thing like, oh my gosh, like what am I going to do? And even in the promo after the match, he's just like, I don't know what happens if we win or if we lose, or I don't know. There was like some weird, like, I was like, is he talking about dying versus living? Like, what's going on here?
They had a Sky Dome to fill, brother. So they had to be careful. During this time, they were still thinking Sky Dome. So they had to protect Tony Lister or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. It was very unusual and weird to see that. You know, he sold those punches, which nobody ever did, not even Andre. So that was the first time for that.
And the Zeus character, he doesn't know how to do anything. So I guess anybody can do a bear hug because he squeezes Beefcake, and Beefcake later said that, you know, he was squeezing the life out of him or something. I don't remember how Beefcake. You know, the one thing when I was watching the promos with Beefcake and Hogan, you know how we always made fun of, and we just disliked the Vince McMahon vocabulary. Like he would just say these words in like weird ways that non-humans would talk. Beefcake had a few of those in this promo. I was like, what the hell is this dude even talking about? He trying to use these like dictionary words when a casual word is better. So they're building to this match. It's
you know what, as a side note and full disclosure here, not saying I'm proud of it. I'm just a product of wrestling. Whenever I've run some therapy groups and I'm talking and I've had like 20, 25 people that they're doing therapy with, I've used the term each and every one of you, and I feel so ashamed for that. And think, but it's just something that comes out automatically, just because I've been exposed to this guy for 30-some years. Now I don't say things like unbelievable or some of the other wacky stuff he would say, but each and every one of you is definitely part of my vocabulary, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever, because nobody ever says anything. And it does make sense, but that's a Vinceism that I know I got from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they're setting up SummerSlam main event, Hogan and Zeus and Beefcake and Savage. And they're also teasing that Elizabeth could be back, but it might be even too dangerous to bring Elizabeth back because you don't really know with this monster. The human wrecking machine is what they call Zeus. And so they're kind of teasing that the fans who want to see Elizabeth there, they're teasing that she may be there for the match.
If we think about it in kayfabe terms, right? Who is Zeus? Like, why does he act like that? Like, I know that WWF has traditionally, wrestling in general has traditionally been very borderline racist, stereotypical with the Islanders, right? The Islanders always have a handler, they eat raw fish, etc. But Zeus is an African American man. Like, why is he so like savage like? Why isn't he just a regular person? Like, these are things that would need an answer today in today's wrestling, but back then,
it wouldn't fly.
We just accept it, because he's just a cartoon character is what he is, but he's a real person. And then you wonder how does he have a conversation with people? What does his family think of him? And so anyways, I'm just overthinking it. But now I think about these things when I watch old school wrestling like that.
What I wonder is if Vince thought he was like a creation in a sense, because, like Frankenstein's monster or something, right? And so he comes out and he can't really speak. Like he even says, I always love this. It wasn't Brutus the Barber Beefcake. It was the Beefcake Barber. He always had it backwards for some reason.
Right.
And I'm assuming that was on purpose. Like, but what is Vince telling him? Like, because we know the real Tiny Lister, we know Debo.
He's a very charismatic man and very well spoken.
And he can talk. He can talk. This was him sort of acting this Zeus character. And look, Dave is very explicit in the Observers by saying the key to this gimmick for Heat is that he is a very large black man, and some of the reason to put him in is because there are a lot of racist people who watch wrestling. Like Dave was very blatant about calling Vince McMahon out on that, but at the same time saying that's the history of the wrestling business, and that's the history of boxing as well. You know, people have heard of the Great White Hope.
Great White Hope, correct? Yes.
And you know, just the idea. Rocky Balboa against Apollo Creed against Clubber Lang. Same deal.
Mason the Line Dixon.
Mason the Line Dixon. By the way, Rocky Balboa, that movie came out in 4K. And I'm still
Don't tell Danny that you'll have a conundrum if you talk about that whole 4K thing with Rocky.
I know. I can't tell because there's a director's cut on it. I don't think Sly cut it though, as far as I can tell. It's like they just randomly added a few scenes that were excluded in the original movie, and I've watched about 60-70% of it. I could tell like there's like 2 or 3 things that they added. Didn't really change the movie, but like I don't know. I really want the Sylvester Stallone like. I guess we will never get the Avildsen Rocky 5 cut. That's the one that we all want to see.
Especially because Sly doesn't own it anymore. They took it away from him, so it's really going to be a long time before we see that, if ever.
But I mean, he attempted to recut Rocky 4. Like of all the ones to recut, that's probably the one that you don't do it because
he made it worse. I hate that cut that he watched it. He made it worse.
Rocky 4 is like a lean, mean 75-minute music video, and it's perfect in that. And so he tried to change it to make it more meaningful, but I don't know. Like it was a weird cut of Rocky Balboa. I was like, is it necessary?
He took out the robot from Rocky 4, which is a travesty of justice.
Yeah. But Rocky Balboa in 4K, like, you know, I bought it because it was in 4K more than the extended cut, but it was just weird. And
it comes with both of them, right? It comes with both of them. People want to watch the theatrical or the director's cut. Yeah, it's all good.
All right, now the last match, and this would have sent today's Twitter world on fire because the Brainbusters beat Demolition in a 2 out of 3 falls match for the tag team championship. And they're playing off of a previous match between the two where Demolition throws Joey Marella into the corner because they can't wait to get their hands on these guys and they get disqualified. So they make this 2 out of 3 falls and Demolition gets disqualified again. The problem is that 2 years prior, the British Bulldogs and the Hart Foundation had a 2 out of 3 falls match on Saturday night's main event. There was a disqualification involved in that match, and the Bulldogs won the falls that should have given them the titles. And Jesse the Body cackles after the match, and he's like, "Vince, you're an idiot. You can't change the titles on a disqualification." But in this match, which is only 2 years later,
they changed the titles.
They changed the titles, and specifically, Jesse says after the second fall, which is the disqualification fall. By the way, it's the deciding fall that cannot end in disqualification. It has to have a clean fall in order for the championship to change hands. So they absolutely changed the rules just 2 years later to get to the desired outcome of the Brainbusters winning the tag team titles.
Well, at least they had an explanation for it, right? Because I could accept that. I mean, there's a lot of committees, you know, in legitimate sports. I mean, we're huge baseball fans. How many rule changes have we had in the last 10 years?
Extra inning rule drives me up the wall.
Right. So I could accept that as long as Jesse explained it, which he did. It's to me it's valid. So I don't see no controversy or trying to get out of it, you know, by changing the rules. They change the rules. It happens all the time in legitimate sports.
Okay, so that sets up where we're going for SummerSlam, and I'm excited to see. I haven't seen SummerSlam. I don't even know if I've seen it since 1989. I may have watched it, you know, once on VHS or something after that. But
it's a good show. I like this show.
I'm pretty excited to watch it. So we'll talk about that on the next show that we do for the September show, which covers the August years. But now let's talk about some WCW because
well, first of all, I gotta say one of the things that I don't know how you feel about this, but they cram a lot of stuff into that 1 hour of Saturday Night's Main Event because I don't know how it's always weird with time management. Even taking it back to today, how is it that Triple H gives us 5 matches? That's all we get. But somehow these matches and the time in between, it seems like it's forever, right? It's like all these, I don't know, commercials, that time, Jolly Roll singing, whatever. But then AEW sometimes, because I'm a nerd like this, right? I'm do time management and whatnot. I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, they're only like 4 matches in, and it's already like an hour and a half. But all these matches are getting like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But somehow you get them all in. And I trip out on the time management of both companies and how they distribute their time. And it's the same time, except you get more with the other, you know, with AEW. Same thing with this Saturday Night's Main Events. Like, they cram so much stuff. And they get time because that Brainbusters Demolition match got time. Beefcake and Savage went through a commercial break, so that got time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just weird how, like, when you produce these things, how you end up being able to, like, just fit everything in, you know? Because they're giving us like 4 or 5 matches per episode, which is only an hour and 5 minutes or something. I don't know. The nerd in me always just tripped out on stuff like that. It's just,
I can tell you what it is for Peacock, because when streaming first came out, so everybody knows Netflix. You know, Netflix has been around forever. Hulu came out, and Hulu was the first company, at least as far as I can remember. If you had a subscription, that to me meant, oh, no commercials. You're paying them so that they don't show you commercials. Hulu started to experiment with adding like a 10-second ad at the beginning of the show that you were watching. And I was like, man, like, I paid for this subscription. Why am I getting an ad? So it was called, back then, it's probably still called this, double dipping. So basically, you would pay a subscription, and then they would show you an ad at the same time. And the idea was, well, if a lot of people decide to unsubscribe, then maybe we don't do this ad stuff. But if it's still, you know, pretty similar subscription numbers, then we'll keep it in. And I don't know if you probably do know this because you follow the TV and movie industry pretty closely, but Netflix, I don't know what Netflix charges these days, $20 or whatever.
They're expensive
for a subscription. Well, they have a different tier, which is like, I don't know, $8 or something.
Yeah, say $8, $7.99,
where they'll show you commercials. Now, Netflix will make more per subscriber on the $8 subscription because of their ability to show us ads.
Right.
So they want you on the $8 versus the $20. So they're gonna push you that way. So for Peacock, I don't know. Peacock just bumped up their prices, so it's probably more expensive now. But they're not charging you $50, which is the AEW show, right? So
yes,
they're only charging you $10 or $12, or in some cases, if you have ads, $5. And so the idea is like, well, we're not charging them $50, so we can actually just show them ads that we want to show. Now, in my case, because I technically have the no ads version of Peacock, they're not showing me the same ads that they're showing the $5 subscribers, but instead they have to fill the time in which they're showing the live ads to that unit. So what are they showing me instead? These same ass WWE video packages that I've seen 1,000 times. The running joke going back a couple years was, oh, it's almost time for the Bobby Lashley video package that we see, you know, every single show.
Yeah, they showed that one a bunch of times. I remember that.
And so because you have these ads, well, they don't want to show us ads, so instead they just show us hyperbole from WWE. So really what it is it's more like a Monday Night Raw from a timing perspective,
right,
than it is like an AEW pay-per-view. And, you know, some people are like, oh, AEW is too many matches. But to me, like you said, it's boom, 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 boom. I don't have to see this crappy video package that I've seen a bunch of times, or, you know, over and over and over again.
Right.
But then at the same time, these AEW shows can be very long, and
yes,
after 5
matches
hours, you're just sweating and you're just tired. And the WWE show is a little bit more digestible, but it also feels a little bit more commercial at the same time.
Yeah. No, I have a whole thing about that, and I think that's what people don't understand, right? Is that Triple H has to take that into consideration. All these 3 to 4 minute breaks between matches to run those commercials for the people that are not paying for the plus or whatever. But it's still something that he's got to budget into the pay-per-view time. But what to me, the scam really comes into the fact that they also have their own commercials. Like, so not only do we have to deal with the Peacock commercials, but then they also have their own commercials with the wrestlers, Little Caesars, stuff like that. So we're still, so regardless, it doesn't matter what tier you get. You're being bombarded by commercials. Absolutely. Regardless, and so it's at the end of the day, it's a scam. I know that they talked to Shapiro, right, who runs the entire show, and they asked him about the match situation, the ticket pricing, a lot of the stuff that I don't like personally. I don't like the whole 5 matches per show thing, especially if I'm their lives, because I feel like we're paying more and we're getting less. The production value has completely gone to shit. I'm not a fan of it. I like the camera angles, but the actual in-arena production value is really non-existent now. It's really what it is. But he's right. I like his answer. He's like, we haven't got any pushback on that, and so until the fan base starts talking with their money, they're not going to change anything. I do think that sometimes they take it over. They go a little over the line with the commercials, the sponsors, because when you're dealing with a blood feud, like you don't want the whole arena to have like a Fruit Loops banner all over the place, right? Like it's a blood feud, and so.
Well, I mean, they will allow you to have bracelets in blood feuds these days.
Yeah, that's true. So and they brought it back, by the way, on Monday.
Oh, I'm so mad.
So I have my issues with WWE, how corporate is getting, and I'm hoping that the fan base starts pushing back, especially some of these ticket prices. They're so ridiculous now, man. Like, I know that Mark Shapiro had stated that he's trying his hardest not to price like the lower middle class out here, But I don't see how. I mean, for nosebleeds, you're looking at $100 a pop. I don't know how a family of 4 could go to that show. That's a $400 investment there. So it's getting harder and harder, and until the fan base starts pushing back, they're not going to change anything.
Yeah, no, 100%. And if they get off of this hot streak that they're on, then they will have to think about those things. But you rarely see ticket prices go down. That's the thing is, I would be interested to see what happens if they slow down a little bit, because I don't know. You know what's going to happen though. You know this. I know you stopped following the UFC once the Fertitas got out of the game.
That's right.
But they're running this show at the Sphere in Vegas, and they're gonna more than double their highest gate ever, because the Sphere, you have to charge these crazy amount of prices just to run a show at the Sphere. And I was talking to Dave about this on Wrestling Observer Radio. I was like, okay, so the UFC has just figured out how to sell their biggest gate of all time for a random show. It's not even a special show. Like, what does that say about where ticket prices are today? If they can get that much money out of their fan base, how are they not going to just raise ticket prices for every other show, even outside of the Sphere? That's what that told me. And if you think about why this relates to WWE, TKO is the entity that they both are part of. So they're going to use something that works with their UFC audience, and they're going to figure out a way to use it with their WWE audience. By the way, I know you just spent a good chunk of change to go see the shows in Toronto. Mm-hmm. I have not paid for a WWE show, I want to say, since WrestleMania 35 weekend. I think I paid for an NXT show. Ever since then, anytime I have been at a WWE show, it's because, my buddy who works at the Ringer, he gets comped and I go with him. Or I've been with Dave and Dave gets comped. I don't think as much as I enjoy the live Raw now, because I hated the live Raw for the longest time. It's a really fun show now. They do a really good job with during the downtime and during the commercials, keeping the audience hyped
Yeah,
up. I
yeah.
really enjoy that show. I'm not spending $200 to go though. I don't think
No,
I would do that.
no. Especially because we're older, and I always tell the fans, or the fans that used to listen to the KLB, or anybody where if I have a platform, I always remind them, like, I come from a different era. I've experienced a lot in following wrestling, whether it's PWG or a lot of the local shows. Because I'm like you, remember? I mean, I had the connection with our buddy Steve, from that works at WWE, as a seat filler guy. So
Mm-hmm.
for years and years, I didn't pay. Right, I just go to the Staples Center, boom, you're in. And so I got a little spoiled too, but I, I don't see how I could match my level of fandom and excitement now as a 43-year-old man to where I a lot of the memories that I've accumulated when I was younger.
Yep.
So to me, it's like it doesn't benefit me anymore to like pay $200-300 a ticket. I did it for Toronto because I had other business there. I went to see the Blue Jays,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
all
yeah.
that stuff.
It's
And
vacation. You went on
and it's
vacation.
Toronto. I wanted to go to Toronto. And so that was an outlier in my spending habits. But in general, no, I'm not paying that much. Now, it's interesting because one of my friends just hit me up and he wants to take his kid to WrestleMania in Vegas, which means
We actually have a question here from Jay Boba, who
okay.
wants to know if you're going to Mania next year in Vegas.
I might go. I might go because my buddy wants to go and he wants to bring his kid, and his kid's really into it right now. He even bought him a belt and everything. So I might go, but I'll tell you what, I fear those prices, man. I mean,
Oh yeah,
because one thing that I always tell people is that I don't do nosebleeds anymore, man. I pay my
yeah.
dues. I paid my dues when I was a kid. Minimum, I got to be in the center bowl, and so. But those prices scared me. I haven't even seen them, and I'm already scared. So we'll see. But
I want to
I think
be
I'm gonna
out
be there.
there. I want to be out there. I and you get a kick out of this. You guys make fun of me for this. I don't know if I have to actually go to WrestleMania because the things that I want to do that weekend really have to do with networking more than anything else. Because that it's just it's like podcaster website, radio host
Yeah,
central
yeah.
out there. So I want to network with people who I know, but I don't really get to see on a daily basis. So that's kind of my fun. If the opportunity was there to go to maybe one, I don't think I could do those two back-to-back nights though. That would
It's
be
in the
pretty
middle of
hard.
April. I remember. Was it last year, or maybe it was a different show where like it was your wife's birthday,
Oh
and
yeah,
so
now it's on Easter this year, so I skipped that. So I don't. That's not my issue anymore.
yeah. But I mean, unless you get hooked up by your connections, it's gonna be pricey to go to 2 nights. It's gonna be pricey to go one night. So
Not and the hotels are going to be expensive.
yeah.
From what I understand, your favorite, the leader. I think he's trying to get like a giant Airbnb for folks who are
That would be
working for
cool.
this for the
I wouldn't pay
FMW
for that, but
website.
that would be cool. Um, do you think that the WWE, and I think they would because Mark Shapiro already did it with UFC, but do they run the Sphere for SmackDown in the Hall of Fame? That would be interesting.
So my take on that is they don't have that high roller fan base that UFC has.
But
I don't.
they also don't have to be as greedy because I think UFC wanted to make a big profit. I mean, I know Dave said that it was 250,000 to rent that place out, which I find ridiculous because you got to allow these attractions to make some profit, right? And so I don't know how true there is to that. Even if there was, um, you could scale it to where it's reasonable. I mean, people. That's the whole thing about this whole quote unquote, inflation and recession. It's like a lot of the business metrics are showing us that that's not the case. People still
Mhm.
have a lot of disposable income.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what's going on now and how business, especially the entertainment business, is changing, and I'm also including movies and all that stuff. There's so many more options now. So you have to every kind of form of entertainment has to bring their A game in order for people to invest in them because now it's not like it was before. Right now here we have a whole controversy because we're about to open up the Inuit Dome and Intuit Dome with the Clippers,
Yeah,
and they
that
sent
looks
out
awesome.
yeah, I mean, well, they had it was a big nightmare with the first concert there last week. They still have kinks in the technology.
Oh, really? It
Yeah,
didn't go
it was
well.
bad. It was bad. It didn't go well at all.
Who was it? It was like Bruno Mars or something?
Bruno Mars. It was Bruno
Okay.
Mars. Yeah, they did the whole ribbon cutting thing, and then he performed. But he ended up going out there like 2 hours late because they couldn't get the technology to work, and that entire arena is all technology based. But they released the ticket pricing for the Clippers. Now, if anybody knows the Clippers were the lower middle class option for the folks here in LA, right? You
Yeah.
want to go to a basketball game, you can't go see the Lakers because they're very expensive. You go see the Clippers. That's not going to happen anymore.
No.
I think the cheapest ticket for the Clippers was $500 for opening day.
Damn.
So a lot of people are upset, but they're almost sold out.
Yeah.
So there again, I mean, until people start talking with their dollars and their wallet, nothing's ever going to change. And like you said, and I don't disagree with it. This is good business. You kind of push the market up until you can't push it anymore, and that's what these businesses tend to do. Is like, oh, $500 for the cheapest ticket is still going to sell out. Let's try $550. Let's try $600, and so on and so forth. So it's good business. And I always encourage people, don't just talk it, don't go, don't support them, and then that's what they listen to. You know what?
Well,
go ahead.
We know Taylor Swift basically does WrestleMania every night, and her tickets are like the most expensive out there because people are willing to pay, and people are traveling to go to these shows to see her, paying some of the highest ticket prices ever. And the tickets are like almost impossible to get as they are. And that is the most successful artist going right now. And her fan base is young girls. And so, pops and mom and dad are paying crazy prices for their daughters to go to these shows, and
and they have to pay for them too, because not all parents are gonna just drop their kid off at an Uber and be like, good luck.
I mean, she has a large fan base nonetheless, but a lot of young girls who are just giant Taylor Swift fans. So I like Taylor's savviness, but there is Taylor, if she wanted, she could have cheaper tickets, but her methodology is, well, if I have cheaper tickets, then the scalpers are going to be the ones who make money, not me. And so I might as well be the one to make the money.
Yeah, the secondary market has been very influential in all this entire conversation we're having. And also, I mean, I'm sure her people are telling her, because she seems like she's really is invested in her fandom. Like, she's not a hypocrite. She comes off as very genuine with her fandom, to the point that she cut a promo on Ticketmaster when that whole fiasco happened. So I do feel like her people, they're like, you could also be more expensive and you're not, it's like, so there's that whole other side too. It's like, her tickets are ridiculously expensive, but they're at market value. And so at the end of the day, if she was to push the market even more, I'm sure she could make even more money, but she hasn't. So no, I mean, ultimately, and people don't understand this when I say it, but the consumer always has the power. It's just that they get sucked into the hype, and then they're like, well, not only do they bitch about ticket prices, they also pay for them. So why would anybody? It would be dumb of them to like lower the prices, right? So we'll see what happens with that. But it's an interesting conversation, and something, being sports fans and wrestling fans, is something to keep an eye on.
All right, so WCW, NWA, at this time, we're watching the greatness that is Lex Luger. Is this the best Lex Luger of all time?
Yes.
Is it even close?
Yes. As a character, me and Big D love that little in between, like the NWO and like when he jumped ship to the Mall of America and then the NWO, he had this gimmick, all right, which has never been duplicated, but it's out there for any promotion. TK, if you're hearing us, take it and give it to someone. He had this gimmick where he was best friends with Sting.
Yeah.
Behind Sting's back, he was ill. Remember, like he would shoot the fans, like, don't touch me. And then when Sting would turn around, he would high five them, right? It never got a payoff, because once the NWO came in, everything changed. But I love that gimmick, like because it seems like that's him as a person, or was him. So it was very genuine and authentic to him. But that's just as a character. As a worker, 1989, that was top Luger right there, man.
Yeah,
this guy was awesome.
He's amazing, so much so where Dave is just like begging them, like, do not turn him babyface. Like, he's going to get over enough doing what he's doing. You turn him babyface, and he's not going to be as over. And then he obviously gets to work with the great Ricky Steamboat, who's just, he has an ability, which is very interesting because I find Ricky Steamboat to be a little bland. I would imagine a lot of people find him to be bland, but A&E did a documentary on him, WWE documentary, that I found to be, it's like, oh, Ricky does have a little bit of personality, but as a pro wrestling character, he was so bland. And so when you're getting into these matches, the fans are behind Lex, but because the wrestling is so good and because Ricky is such a good babyface in the ring, he does eventually turn them and he becomes the babyface in the match. But that was an interesting dynamic in those matches too.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you that the character of Ricky Steamboat always came off as bland. He was like the ultimate cookie cutter babyface. But the human being is a different story. I remember Dave reported, very giddy, by the way, which says a lot about Dave. Well, I don't know if you remember this. Remember when Dave was going around saying that Ricky Steamboat was going out with girls like in their 30s and stuff, and he was already like in his 60s? Like he was like, oh, because Ricky had that period where he was single, right? He had gotten a divorce and then he was single, and then he met his new wife later on. But it was like Dave was like, he's dating girls half his age and he's happy. And I'm like, why is that part of the story, Dave? Like, other than the fact that which is cool, props to Ricky, he's doing good. But that always tickled me, the fact that Dave would in a very giddy fashion would report that he's still having, and Dave was a little more explicit, by the way. He was like, he's still going out with girls half his age. But yeah, no, like you said, I saw the same documentary. And there is a lot more personality to Ricky, Richard Blood or whatever his name is. So yeah, it's good. Too bad we never really saw that as a performer, but
yeah,
his job was always to be that cookie cutter baby face, and that's what he did.
Yeah, Dave has some pet peeves that I find interesting. And we talked I think it was the last time we talked about the hook in the leg, or there was a recent one where he talked about the announcers talking about hooking the leg, and if you don't hook the leg, you can't win. And so, okay, you're giving away the finish of the match. If they don't hook the leg, they're not going to win the match. So Dave had a pet peeve about that. This pet peeve, I'm 100% on board with, because this used to bother me about the NWA promos as well. So Dave hates the generic pay-per-view commercials where they just show the talent, but they don't talk about who's wrestling and what the matches are. And they just run these commercials over and over and over. And this was a NWA WCW staple. The one that I remember the most was the Halloween Havoc ones, because they would have a fun with the spookiness of Halloween Havoc. And so you'd have Sting and you'd have Rick Steiner out there doing spooky voices and stuff.
But no matches.
But there's no matches, so you don't know what show are you buying. You're basically buying a WCW pay-per-view with Sting and Rick Steiner in it and Rick Rude, but you don't actually, if you're just coming across this commercial, not watching their television, you have no idea what you're buying. And so Dave is just on it about this. He's like, you have the ability to sell Terry Funk and Ric Flair, and they're talking about Flair's career, and then you don't even have that on the main promo, the main marketing vehicle that runs commercials outside of your television.
Yeah, I think the excuse for that, and it isn't justified. I agree with Dave. I mean, I agree with him 100%. That's a legitimate pet peeve. But I think the excuse was that they had to film these months ahead, and because they didn't have their booking shit together, that's what you got. I remember Bischoff talking about that, because those commercials were very prevalent during the NWO era. Like, you saw them all the time. And don't get me wrong, some of them were pretty cool. Like, I remember there was a Great American Bash one with like Raven's flock, and they're all just chilling with like hot chicks, and it's like, come and watch the Great American Bash. Like, there was no matches, it was just Raven and his flock, but it was cool though, like the cinematography and stuff. But to Dave's point, it was like, why? What does that do? Who are you? What masters are you trying to serve with that commercial?
Yeah.
If a non-fan suddenly runs into that commercial, what are they? It looks more like a movie. Like, I would be thinking, is that a movie coming out? What's going on? So yeah, I could see how there was a lot of mixed messages with these commercials, and they affected the bottom line for sure.
There's one that I really remember. I think it was I want to say it was Wrestle War, and it was the tagline for Wrestle War was Wild Thing.
Yeah.
And I want to say that there was like rapping involved or something with
Probably
some of the
PN
guys.
News. PN
Well,
News, I
this would have been
think.
more PN News because PN News comes in 91.
Yeah.
But maybe it's 91 then. Maybe it's Wrestle War 91 if they had Wrestle War in
Yeah.
91. But yeah, I remember like a rapping one. And then I
They did
just
have another
remember
one.
it's like Flair's mouthing the word wild thing or the phrase wild thing, but they splice it so that he says like whoa, 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 wild thing. And like he's not saying this, like they're just trying to make him cool. It was weird. Like
It's
but they
also and I don't know how this what I'm about to say is gonna come off like. This is the only way I can articulate it. It's also very southern. Like a lot of their stuff was very southern, very I don't know, it wasn't self-aware, you know, and for both companies, because WWE would do shit like that all the time too. So like they always seem like they were like 10 years behind like the mainstream way of promoting stuff. So like you said, like Ric Flair saying wild thing, like why? But there's a charm to it. Don't get me wrong. Especially now as we're older and it means nothing for money now. We will go back and watch that, but it shouldn't have that. We shouldn't be laughing at these commercials. You know, it almost seems like they were outdated then, right? It seems like you watch these commercials and you're like, this is something out of a time machine from like 10 years ago. Why is this still happening? You know, I know that Dave was also very critical in another section of the Observer for July, the way NWA would have their press conferences, which was very generic and like they wouldn't have a budget for them. So there was a lot of stuff that Dave was trying to kind of bring light to kind of help them out, you know, and they never really caught the memo. So there is that.
all right. So interesting note here is in order to get the Samoan SWAT team over, they actually had them beat the Road Warriors a couple times. This was the first pin that the Road Warriors took. Well, I think it was a fast count, an actual pin, though.
That's the only pin they're gonna take.
Yeah, in 5 years. So the Samoan SWAT team, and a little trivia there. Pretty interesting, but they are, like you said, setting up war games. And in order to set up war games, the Road Warriors are in it. So you got to build up the Samoan SWAT team as they're equals in order for people to buy this match with them in the war games.
But I don't know. I don't know if Dave's gonna talk about it later on in the year. I don't know. As a fan, just as a fan, I have no scoops. I have no news on this. I always felt like WCW management. It's almost like they wanted to bury the Road Warriors on purpose, because if as the year goes on, first of all, they're very rarely in the title picture. And I guess you could argue that they didn't need the titles because they were so over. But then again, they're not really over at this point anymore. This is 89. And I also see them as almost like they want to be manipulated or conned into being using them as a way to get other teams over. Because then the skyscrapers come in. We're going to talk about the skyscrapers a little bit.
Yeah.
The Wild Samoans are there. The Steiners become a big deal after the Great American Bash. So it's almost like the Road Warriors, even before their contract ends in the beginning of 90 and they jump ship, it's almost like they're already being phased out. That's the impression that I've always gotten when I revisit 89 going into 90. And so, yeah, they had a pinfall here, quick, fast count. But even as the year goes on, they continue to put other teams over, you know? And so that's interesting because they were very, very strict on who they lost to. But at this point, they're just being used as mid-card wrestlers.
I wonder if you were to do payroll for this company at that time, like who do you think is making the most money? Is Flair still number one, or would the Road Warriors kind of be with him? Because there's no Dusty, so he's not there. Lex is probably upper tier, but he and Sting are still pretty young in the business.
Yeah. But at the same time, at this time, they were doing the guaranteed contracts already because they didn't want to lose Sting or Luger to the WWF. So I'm going to go with Flair. Even though Flair always says that he was never the top paid guy, but he's always going to say that. I don't see anybody else. I mean, who else would be, at his level? like you said, Dusty's gone. Hogan hasn't come in yet. I mean, once Hogan came in, nobody's going to be making more than Hogan. But at this point, it has to be Flair, you know?
Okay, so this is funny. I almost put this in only in the Observer, but this probably fits here. Do you remember Ruse, the tennis shoes?
No, I don't.
Okay, so the company was called Kangaroo Athletic Wear, based out of St. Louis, and they came out of a line of shoes that featured WCW branding on them, and they were called Ruse. And the thing about Ruse were that they had a zipper on the shoe so that you could actually like put money in it or something if you wanted. So like a kangaroo pouch was the idea.
Oh, God.
I can't believe you haven't heard of these shoes.
No,
Ruse.
I haven't.
Yeah, Kangaroo Athletic Wear. Dave writes that they are doing business.
You know what I remember? Maybe and this is a whole side thing, and sorry for that traffic out there. There was these shoes, right? And I'm trying to remember what they are. You're about 4 years older than me, so you probably remember. They used to have these little gimmicks. It's kind of like Crocs, where you get your Crocs and then you buy gimmicks to attach to them. Well, back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was also shoes like that where you would, but these were tennis shoes, where you would put them on and you would buy gimmicks to like attach to them. But I've never been able to find out what brand they were because I do like to collect retro shoes. Like I got pumps here. Like I got a lot of these retro shoes, like old alley gears I like to buy.
You have any what was it? BKs? What did BK stand for? Brooklyn. What is this? What is it?
What?
Or something. There was a shoe called BKs. I forgot what.
I don't have those, but I am into collecting. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I do collect old retro shoes. That even like localized shoes, because you know how some shoes were only made for a certain section of like the United States or whatever.
British Knights, by the way, they're called British.
Yeah, British Knights. That's right. Yeah, no, I don't have any of those. But yeah. So I was trying to remember. I have a vivid memory of my friends having like their little baggie full of gimmicks, and then they would attach them to their shoes. But
interesting.
I'll look it up.
Wait, you got to reach out to those dudes and see if they remember.
No, I don't keep up with them anymore, man. They're long gone, man.
All right. So you had mentioned that Dave was talking about the business of the NWA at the time, and he was really down on it. And I'm going to read through a couple of bullet points here.
Okay.
So his lead story in the July 10th edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter is that they are losing $25,000 every day running this promotion.
Damn.
And they are essentially becoming a feeder system for the WWF at the time. So he writes, here are some things that they could do to try and reverse the business trends that are happening. But like you said, they are number 2, so it's really hard. And I kind of wonder if he would write the same list about AEW. What would be in that list? But okay, so here's number 1. Establish a celebrity for your wrestlers to ride the coattails of.
Too bad Eminem wasn't there yet.
Eminem.
that was the big. That was Vince Russo wanted to bring him in '99. He was really trying hard to get him in there.
He was pretty big in '99. I was just trying to think of who that would have been in 1989, because in WWF would do
Mike
this.
Tyson. Let's go back to Mike Tyson.
Okay, so
I would go with Mike Tyson.
That's WWF was supposed to work with Mike Tyson in 1990, but he loses to Buster Douglas, and so Buster Douglas does business with them for a Friday night main event. Tyson would not do business with them until 1998.
Right.
WWF did business with Lawrence Taylor in 1995.
Yes. Yeah,
did not work out as well as Mike Tyson did.
250,000 buys. That wasn't much.
Cyndi Lauper obviously was
She's
great
a big deal
for WWF in '84. I watched a documentary about her on Showtime, and she mentions the wrestling stuff. There's like
I gotta watch that. I'm a huge fan of Cyndi Lauper.
She's awesome.
Yes.
They spent like a good 5 minutes on the wrestling stuff about how she needed Captain Lou to be in her videos as her dad, and she met him on a plane and they were just talking, and then that's how she got involved
That's
with
a
Whitney
classic
Richter
story.
and everything.
Yeah.
So obviously that one worked, but who would it have been? Okay, so Mike
Okay,
Tyson is
so I have
probably
a
too
couple of
big.
them. I have a couple of them just thinking movies and what's going on in the movie
Yeah,
business.
1989.
I think Eddie Murphy would work.
Mm.
I think he was over, and that was before he kind of went on the downturn too. He was threatening on going on the downturn, but he was still pretty over. I think anybody from the Brat Pack would have worked, right? I mean, Emilio Estevez, all those people from the Brat Pack. They were old and they were young too. So it's like you got the young demo. Certainly not Eddie Haskell from Leave It to Beaver.
I thought you were gonna say Jason Hervey.
No.
Because Jason
I mean,
Hervey's
he
in the
Wonder
front
Years.
row at this show at the Great American Bash.
Yeah, he
You
had
can
the
just see
Wonder
his
Years.
crazy hair.
Anybody? What about Rob Dibble? Was he over yet? Or
yeah, he was. That was
and I only say Rob Dibble because what a lot of people don't remember. Why should you? If most of the people were probably not even born yet when he was over, he was like this cult figure for a while in baseball, and like he was this kind of wild guy. So
kind of big too. He was a big dude.
Yeah. So he would fit in perfectly in the world of wrestling. He was a character. So I'm thinking outside the box with guys like that too.
So the biggest one that you didn't name is probably MC Hammer in 1989.
Before he lost his money, yeah.
Before he went bankrupt. But I don't know. Like it's just can the second rate like I think they would have to be wrestling fans. And you would have to know that they liked your product and maybe even preferred your product to WWF to then just be interested. Like Eddie Murphy's like partying with supermodels. He's not watching wrestling more than likely, but maybe
Charlie Murphy then.
But maybe somebody of that level, maybe, Bruce Willis is like secretly he's a big
deal at this time. He's a big deal at this time.
Yeah, but I think that's an interesting thing is to kind of look back and who would they be able to work with. Obviously, sports star, you're still talking, Michael and Magic and Larry are still really on top.
They're not, but they're gonna bankrupt the company.
Yeah,
price tag. But okay, so I agree with Dave that works, but I disagree with Dave in that it's an automatic thing because ultimately it comes down to the booking. And where did we learn this? We learned it from AEW. I mean, AEW had Mike Tyson wrestle. People forget that he wrestled.
Shaq wrestled too.
And so it meant nothing because TK didn't book it as something special, and so at the end of the day, not only do you need the celebrity to latch onto, not only do you need a celebrity that's invested, right, and showing some kind of excitement, but you also need some the good booking to kind of follow that as well. And if you don't have that, they're just going to be a wasted money pretty much. So it's not just a celebrity. Like if Eddie Murphy came in, he would probably also fall asleep like Mike Tyson did at that AEW show.
Yawning, he's sitting in the chair, yawning.
And so, no, you need someone to really book around them. And one of the things, WWE, love them or hate them, Vince is the devil. We all know that. They always find ways to make stars. Like they just find ways to make everybody seem larger than life. And it's kind of that's just something they just know how to do really well.
There is one person that I can think of where they tried the celebrity gimmick with a couple times and it just did not work for this guy. And that was the Big Show. Like he actually got Mayweather. Like Mayweather was his match, and I thought Big Show did a great job in that match.
And that was when Mayweather was in his prime, as far as celebrity wise.
But it did, whatever reason, it did not rub off on the Big Show to make him a little bit bigger than life. Do you remember what that match was supposed to be? Actually, though.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Big Dave Batista and Rey Mysterio. How does Mayweather fit into that?
So I think the match. I can't think of who the fourth person is, but I think it's Rey Mysterio and Oscar De La Hoya.
What the hell?
Against Floyd Mayweather and whomever the fourth person was supposed to be. That's what I think the idea was. But De La Hoya's gonna big time WWE. He's saying, "What why?"
He's pretty wacky right now with those. And this is just speculation, folks. With those cocaine infused.
I don't know if it's speculation.
But he's wacky though, and he knows how to put on a show. Let's just put it that way.
There's a good HBO documentary on Oscar where he's pretty honest. That came out a couple years ago on it.
Yeah.
He's pretty honest about that stuff. But yeah, so yeah, I mean that idea, it works, but it has to be the right guy. It has to be the right program. It has to be the right idea. So number
Correct.
2, grab one of WWE's stars. I'm sure they were trying to do this. We mentioned last time how Jim Herd was trying to meet up with Roddy Piper, and Piper no-showed him. And they're trying. You know, we know that they attempted to get Randy Savage at some point, you know, around
Bret
this
Hart
time.
later on a couple years later.
Bret Hart as well.
Yeah, and I don't know why that's so hard. It just goes to show you the lore of the WWF, and also just Vince as this manipulator, right? As this kind of like devil and angel on your shoulder, or whatever you want to call him, because WWF wasn't giving guaranteed contracts at this time. I think only Hulk Hogan had it. So there's that lure of like Jim Herd saying, if you come with me, I'm going to put you on a guarantee, and it's also less dates. But these wrestlers wouldn't buy it. They would be like, no, I'm loyal to Vince. And it's almost like, yeah, it's that classic, the old adage of like, I'm at the big show and I want to stay in the big show. I don't want to go to the secondary, you know, even though there's more money, there's possibly more money in the secondary fed. And I also think people at this point were starting to get scared of Vince, as far as like, if they leave him and then it doesn't work out in WCW, there's nowhere to go back to. So there was that as well.
They would get like not the guy, they would get whomever was a step or two below, until they did get Hogan in '94.
Yeah, like AEW. Remember, TK said he was never going to do that, and he gets Billy Gunn. He gets the Big Show. He gets Mark Henry, who's back now. You know, Mark Henry. You know, as somebody who grew up in the streets like I did, I don't know. I lost a little respect for Mark Henry on that one. You know, he leaves WWF. He cut some promos on them, and then all of a sudden he's back now and he's waving to the fans. I'm like, bro, you just left them and you cut promos on this company, and all of a sudden you're a team player again. Come on, you know.
Because these guys have kids and they want their kids to be, you know, they want their kids to be in the place that they think will take care of them. And so, you know, same thing with,
if it worked for Rey Mysterio, then it could work for anyone else.
Yeah, same thing with Rey. I think, you know, we would see second tier WWF stars go to WCW, like Rick Rude, British Bulldog, but never that top guy until Hogan. And then once Hogan went, then they had their pick.
Everybody went. But one thing you're not saying is that was many years later.
It's like 5 years later.
89 up until like Rick Rude wouldn't show up to like late 91, and that was because he had beef with Vince because of the payoff. So
Vince was advertising him, and he wasn't on any of these shows, and so he's like, "You're advertising me. How come I'm not getting paid for it then? Like, you're using my name and my face to sell these tickets, but you're not giving me the money," because he had the back injury.
Yes. So yeah, everybody you mentioned doesn't come into like almost the Bischoff era. At this point, they're getting those like, you know, third or fourth string guys like the Iron Sheik or the Junkyard Dog. You know,
old like guys who Vince has phased out.
They're done at this point. I can't hardly race even. I can't remember anybody that was not even in their prime, just maybe a couple years away from their prime. I can't think of anyone. And then I think they've made this argument because WWF gets Dusty and they get Barry Windham, you know, and then keep in mind that the following year they would get the Road Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just,
Luger's coming soon after that too.
I mean, not that soon, but yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
All right. So if they could not do those things, he's like, hey, if you still want to have a wrestling promotion, scale it down and build it to basically not lose as much money because you still have television. So just by having television, you can still sell tickets, you can still sell pay-per-views, but just scale everything else down and just try to be net positive with the money. And that kind of relates to the last one, which he says, or you could just run a TV promotion and not worry about running house shows and all of these loops, and just run it as TV and then use TV just to build to a big show. Obviously, you have less of a roster because you don't need that many people. So he's just trying to find other ways that they could coexist instead of doing what they're doing, which is lose 25
You know one thing he didn't say, and I know Bischoff is persona non grata on this show and any other show that's related to the Observer.
I mean, I think he's a grifter, but I think he's charming as all hell.
But one thing that Dave didn't say as a good idea that Bischoff did introduce to the brass was getting paid for the TV. You know, it's like charging WTBS and the networks, the Turner Network, to be like, we're producing TV, pay us. And so when he comes in late '93, early '94, that was the first time they started bleeding money, not because he was a huge successful booker and they were drawing money, because they started getting paid for the TV by the company. You know, so it's essentially just like balancing the books in a lot of ways. But at the very least, that was the first time that the company showed some growth. You know, so I'm surprised Dave didn't think about that. But then again, maybe Dave's thinking they're all under the same umbrella. It would be kind of stupid for you to pay yourself in a sense.
Well,
right?
yeah, I also think that the business is just much different, because I don't know if Vince is getting paid. Like Vince, I don't know how those syndication deals work in 1989.
Yeah, but WCW being on WTBS wasn't syndication. You know, it was an actual show that they had on their network that was contracted to be on the network, but because they owned it, they wouldn't pay them.
Right.
So Bischoff was trying to like stop the bleeding by saying, put a little money on our books, so that, because we're producing television for you, and it worked. It got him, you know, out of the red. You know, now, as far as like what else was I gonna say? Anyways, I forgot what I had another point to make as far as how you save the company. But if it comes back to me, I'll let you know.
Okay. All right. So one other note, and then we'll talk about Great American Bash. I just found this humorous. So the night before the Great American Bash, they run a house show in Philadelphia. Only 3,000 fans paid. But Dave said they were trying to do this thing where, you know, obviously Flair and Funk is like this grudge match. It's a blood feud. Ric's got a broken neck and he wants revenge on this dude. And so Joel Goodhart announces the next show in Philadelphia. And it's like, well, can we announce the main event to be Terry Funk versus Ric Flair without giving away what's going to happen at the pay-per-view? So the way that he tries to do it is he says, the promoters had signed a deal for that our next main event in Philadelphia to be the winner of the Great American Bash title match to defend against the loser of the Great American Bash title match. And the fans had no idea what this dude was talking about. They're like, why is he saying this weird thing? So they it's like silent, right? He's trying to build up so that they can go to the box office and buy tickets for the next time in Philly. So then he goes, so then the next match happens, and they realize, probably because no one went to go buy tickets, that they actually have to say what it is. And so he goes, okay, next time, main event is going to be Ric Flair versus Terry Funk, and the building erupts in applause. Yeah, you know, for the next show. So they were trying to be sneaky because they didn't want to give away the main event, because what if Ric Flair, you know, what if he became paralyzed because of his neck? And you're basically telling us that Ric Flair is going to be fine for this.
But that goes to show you that Vince, we were analyzing the Zeus character earlier. Vince doesn't care about stuff like that. Vince is like, these are cartoon characters, whatever. And here's NWA and their people freaking out over giving away a result and whatnot. And the fans don't care. Now they do. The fans today, they do care. And they'll super analyze and overthink all this stuff.
Yeah.
But the fans then, they were like, we just want to be entertained, yo. So just let it, you know, and that's why they marked out when they got the actual match, you know, instead of trying to be sneaky about it. It was just a lesson in booking, you know?
All right, Great American Bash. When we first talked about doing this show, we were thinking that we weren't going to go as long, but as usual, we are going long. But let's try and get through this card a little more quickly.
Yes.
The King of the Hill double ring battle royal, it gets down to two men. Those two men are also the skyscrapers of Dangerous Dan Spivey and Big Sid Vicious. Did you remember how over Vicious was this early in his career?
Yes, as a little kid, that's another guy that fascinated me. He had a very unique body, and by that I'm saying he was jacked, but it was different than everyone else, and
because
he
he
was
was
so
so
tall.
tall.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was tall, and he had that weird charisma about him. I mean, he didn't say much, but he had a charisma about him. Yeah, he was the guy, and I know that at this time, that's what they were thinking. So it didn't work out that way because Sid ended up being legitimately Psycho Sid.
Yeah.
So he ended up kind of, and he was a huge fan of softball, um, so it didn't really work out. I think his whole career was a big letdown, but at this time he was young, and so he was the guy. And I remember seeing him in this match in the opening contest, and it was just, yeah, I was into him right off the bat.
Yeah.
I know he
Me
had
too.
come from Memphis, I believe.
Yeah.
So he had just started. That's one cool thing about this show too, is that it introduces us to a lot of new characters too. We got Brian Pillman, we got Sid Vicious. There's a couple other ones in there in that battle royal. So yeah, it was, we saw that it was a new era for the company as well.
So basically, Teddy Long says that instead of having these two guys fight to see who wins the 2-ring battle royal, they're all just going to split the check and they'll all be fine. So Brian Pillman defeats Bill Irwin in the real kind of opener of the wrestling matches, and it's completely fine. It
Just a way
is,
to introduce Pillman,
yeah,
That's
it
it.
is also a match that you could have found to be on like a television show, like not even a main event of a television show, just like a normal match to get Brian over.
This is the
Uh,
kind of match that you would never see today on either of the two big companies as pay-per-views. Like, you don't see these kind of throwaway uh, introduction matches for wrestlers. You don't see that anymore.
yeah, yeah, totally. Um, then the skyscrapers came back out and they beat the bumps off of the dynamic dudes. Poor Shane Douglas and Johnny Ace
Yeah,
here.
that experiment was coming to an end. Last month we put them over a little bit because they were introduced. Actually, I've always hated them because they never ride their skateboards, which I brought up last month. But by this point, they're starting to get along in the tooth. They're getting that heel heat, even though they're baby faces. So they pretty much fed them to the skyscrapers.
By the way, Jay Boba has a super chat that we'll get to after the Great American Bash review. Jim Cornette beats Paul E. Dangerously in a tuxedo match where the idea is to strip the other person down to their underwear. Now, I'm not saying anything about the audience of this show, but it's, we were just talking about the kind of audience that you book to,
Right.
and it's just weird that the whole idea is to see somebody in their underwear, and that person would be Paulie Dangerously. Supposedly, Cornette jacks up his knee the night before, so his selling in the ring by selling the bad leg was actually not so much selling. He was actually in a lot of pain because he blew out his knee from the night before.
Man, that guy's always blowing out his knee. He blew it out in that scaffold match. He blew it out the night before here. It's interesting with Paul Heyman and Jim Cornette because I've never met two wrestling characters who respected each other more while kind of promoting how much they hate each other in real life.
Yeah.
Like every time they talk about each other, even today in whatever podcast, like Paul Heyman will never talk about Cornette because Paul Heyman is such a big deal now. But when Cornette talks about Heyman, he puts him over in that passive aggressive way, and so it's like just say they respect the guy, man. It's not gonna kill you.
Well, I mean,
Um,
Cornette has gone on to say, that I think in some senses he believes that ECW kind of created the style of wrestling that he thought was a little bit over the top, and maybe was not for the betterment of pro wrestling. But a lot of the stuff that he says about Tony Khan is kind of stuff he was saying about Paul Heyman, 20 years ago, 30
right,
years ago.
right, and it is from a guy that had the tar and feather match, folks. If talking about going over the top, and you know, but yeah, they just have different philosophies. I'm more of a Paul Heyman fan myself. I like his style of wrestling. I think Jim Cornette could relate. It's just way too old school for me sometimes. Even
Yeah.
even with his old Smokey shows that I go back and revisit from time to time, some of that stuff is just very old school, and so that's not my thing. So yeah, so they had their match here, the tuxedo match, and like you said, it ended up with one of them being in their skivvies, and that was that.
I think Jim Cornette one time said that Paul Heyman would rather climb a tree to tell a lie than to stand on the ground and tell the truth.
But I always trip out on these carnies because he would do the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
like what me and Big D would always laugh at the old KLB show because it's like the carnies would try to manipulate everyone, right? But the moment somebody manipulates them, they're like the biggest victims in the world. Like it's like, oh my God, stop the presses. I've been taken advantage of. But yet you have the knife in your back at all times too, ready to go, you know? And it's like that always fascinates me about all these old carnies in wrestling. Like they talk so much shit, but they do the same thing over and over.
Well, what was the guy that the Brian, the guy who was the mastermind behind the Brian Pillman character? What you love this guy? What's his name?
Collins, the coach, right? The his coach, his football coach.
Ted or no, I'm talking about the trainer guy. Kim Wood. Kim
Wood, yes.
So Kim Wood, his philosophy.
He had so many classic lines in that Dark Side, by the way. We need to go back and revisit that.
Oh my God, dude. When Dave and I interviewed him off the air, this dude was wild. He I think he said that the people who are the bookers are actually the biggest marks and the easiest to fool. And that's why he went after Vince and Bischoff, and he thought that the plan was what was actually doable because he thought those guys would be most susceptible to something like this. Which is kind
they're all, to me, I'll take that one step further. It's like everybody in the business is the biggest marks because I don't know if I ever shared this story with you, but whenever we used to have pay-per-view parties here in LA, and we used to invite the PWG guys over, every single one of those guys would show up wearing their own wrestling shirt. And that's when I knew, like, they're all marks. Like, why are you wearing your own wrestling shirt to like a little kickback here to watch a pay-per-view? Anyway, so that's where
they're hoping that they could sell a couple or something. I don't know.
No, they just showed up. I think it was more like, oh, that's you on a shirt. Like if there was some people that are not into wrestling at this party, but it was still their marks. You know, it's like I wouldn't wear my own shirt.
Yeah. All right, Steiner Brothers with Missy beat the Varsity Club. This was a short match, 4 minutes 22 seconds, but it was a Texas Tornado match. So both teams were just killing each other.
Finally, the blow up to the Varsity Club angle. Yeah. This is the longest angle in the history of wrestling, man. It's like, and I think this is the official. Maybe there's like a house show and some nerd to correct me, but I think this is the official debut of the Steiner Brothers as a unit. You know. As far as wrestling, we'll see. Maybe there was a house show here and there, but I don't think they wrestled on TV before this as the Steiner Brothers. So here they are as the Steiner Brothers, finally blowing it off with the Varsity Club, and then they would both go in their own directions.
Any thoughts on the passing of Kevin Sullivan?
Oh, man. I mean, I was a huge fan of him. I mean, for a lot of different reasons. He was a character in every which way there was to be a character. I did read Dave's bio on him, and I think it's funny because you could tell when Dave likes somebody and when he doesn't, just the way he can, which is fine. I think it's a human nature. We all do that. But he really liked Kevin. You could tell that he really respected him and liked him. One of the things that I admired about him, from a personal side, because me coming off like this corporate, I just came off of this corporate world where it kind of burned me out, and that's why I took off. He had this ability to walk that corporate right, and he knew exactly what to do. And I've met people like him, and it takes talent and it takes a lot of discipline and patience, because if you don't know how to walk through that corporate minefield, it'll kill you. Like it'll literally kill you. So I respect his ability to do that. If I'm going to remember Kevin Sullivan for anything, and there's a lot to remember him by, is the fact that he was able to survive in that political minefield for all those years and have some sort of influence. That's not a lot of people could do that. Yeah. So I commend him for that. Yeah.
In a match that I was slightly disappointed with watching it again, Sting with Eddie Gilbert versus the Great Muta with Gary Hart ended in a double pin. Now the match itself was fine. The finish was janky. I thought whenever you do the double pin, and one guy raises the shoulder, and then the other guy raises the shoulder, that is goofy as it is. But when you do it poorly, and it's very clear that one guy should have won the match and it's the other guy who wins. That stuff is like, come on, man. Like, why do we do finishes like that to make? And the fact that Sting isn't like killing these referees, like he should have been throwing these dudes around, going like, I really won this match. I don't know. I just always thought that finish, that type of finish, when it's that wonky, always makes the babyface look kind of bad.
No, I agree with you. I don't like. I've never liked that finish, and thankfully, that finish hasn't made a return in any way, shape, or form. But I have a different perspective because of the nostalgia factor. I think I've always loved that Sting Great Muta feud because they would take it to Japan as well. I don't know if you remember that. I mean, it was an actual feud, and I think I don't even know why they didn't bring Keiji Muto over to the United States when Sting retired earlier this year. They should have brought him in because to me that was his. Other than Ric Flair, which at this point
think
was
WWE has their hooks in on him. That's why.
That's true. That's true. They did induct him into the Hall of Fame. Maybe that was the reason why. And so I think this is known to me. It's always going to be Sting's first real feud in WCW, and to me, this is also what made Great Muta into like a legend, even though he was only in WCW for a year. Because to somebody from my generation, that 1 year that Great Muta had in WCW, like we never forgot him. Like he was so special and so unique that we always remember the Great Muta, and it's a shame that as he was turning babyface, he ended up going back to New Japan. But yeah, so I have a lot of different memories and feelings from this match. I like it. I think it's good. But I do agree with you that it was pretty much a fuck finish.
Lex Luger against Ricky Steamboat. We talked about this already, but
possibly Lex Luger's best match in his career as far as television matches.
So according to Dave, the match was marketed as a no DQ match, but at some point during the television, they changed it, but they forgot to tell Ricky because he was still doing interviews with the stipulation being no DQ. And so by the time they got to the show, it was announced as a no DQ match, and Lex basically said, I'm not wrestling if this is a no DQ match.
Yeah, he could have promo earlier saying that.
Which doesn't really make sense for the heel in this instance because he was the one who was bringing in the chairs and stuff. But then again, he also could do so, and then he would keep his title. So then maybe that's the psychology behind it. But Ricky basically had to agree in the ring that the stipulation was waived off so that he could have the match. And then, of course, because you waive off the stipulation, the match ends in a disqualification, and Ricky is the one who gets disqualified.
So I wonder if it was Ricky refusing to do a job on his way out because he was already on his way out because he had signed that wacky 6-month contract, which I've never heard of.
The next Observer after this one, the lead story is Ricky leaving NWA.
Yeah, I remember that. Even when I was a kid, I remember that he just vanishes. So I wonder if the original plan was to have Luger pin him clean on his way out. And then at the end, Ricky was like, no, I'm not going to do a job. So they had to switch it over and just end in a DQ. That's what makes the most sense to me, because they were not going to have Ricky beat Luger when on his way out and take the title. So yeah, but with that said, this is one of my favorite Luger matches of all time. Possibly my favorite, even though it was only like 11 minutes.
Yeah. Dave's story or Dave's line about these matches, they got 25 minutes of stuff into 11 minutes of match, or that's how he would describe it.
But that was always Ricky Steamboat. That's another thing we haven't talked about. Ricky Steamboat has this unique ability to, like, you think that he's been in a war and the match is only like 10 minutes. You know who else had that gift was Bret Hart. If you remember Bret Hart matches, like it would be like 10 minutes in and he's sucking wind.
Yeah, he's and Bret's also a great seller. He makes things that look not real, but it makes it look like he's struggling or he's in pain. He's even walking, he's in pain because of what just happened to him. All right, the War Games match was a tag team War Games. So it's Road Warriors and the Midnight Express with Dr. Death against the Freebirds. So Michael Hayes, Jimmy Garvin, Terry Gordy, and the Samoan SWAT team with Paul E. This match was a good match. It was brutal. These guys were killing each other. It was just missing the lead dog. It was missing the Ric Flair or the Dusty Rhodes. But otherwise,
Steve Williams tried to become that, but he didn't really succeed. I noticed that. And then because he had that spot where he bench presses. Was it Terry Gordy?
Terry Gordy.
That was insane.
I love that spot because it looks impressive as hell, and it is impressive as hell. But Terry Gordy also has to push up at the same time, so that so they have to time it correctly, so that Dr. Death could actually, do some reps with him. But Terry Gordy is pushing from the bottom, so that it's easier for Dr. Death to push up. Yeah, that spot was great.
You know what? I've never, even to this day, even the NXT ones, the WWE ones, I've never been a fan of these matches because there comes a point where they just get so repetitive.
Yeah,
and it's like
blood and guts, man. We see blood.
Yeah,
and guts
I don't like those
year.
matches either. Like, these war games, blood and guts, they're not my first style of matches. It's just, what could you do? Eventually they're all just hitting each other with plunder, and it just makes a loud noise, and there's no effect. So it's like every match is the same essentially.
Yeah, I think, AEW finishes jump the shark when you can set a man on fire and he doesn't actually lose the match.
Yeah.
All right, main event, Ric Flair, Terry Funk. This isn't the classic that would be the November match at the, I think it's the New York Knockout show.
Yes, New York Knockout with I Quit
But
match.
This is a fight, man. Like, this is less of a wrestling match than it is a brawl.
Well, it had to be because Terry was hurt. He had pretty much a broken back at this point, so he had to kind of go garbagey a little bit. He couldn't be so technical just because he was hurting.
And the night before, he has a match with Sting, and Sting wins the match, but somehow he pins Wild Bill Irwin and not Terry Funk to win the match. So
that's when they were doing that gimmick where Terry Funk would he would find his way out of the match, right? Because he couldn't wrestle. Like, the entire Bash tour was him trying to get out of the match because he couldn't wrestle.
Yeah.
But I think the night before was he actually did wrestle Sting, but like you said, somehow he ended up pinning Bill Irwin. No, I like this match too. I like you said, it was different for a Flair match, especially coming off that technical exhibition that we got with the Ric Flair. I mean, with the Ricky Steamboat trilogy. Mm-hmm. So this was different, and man, Terry Funk, he had that character down so cool. Like, that's another guy. When I was a kid, man, he just his charisma just penetrated to the TV, and then he had that awesome like spaghetti western theme song that he's only used in this run. He's never used it before or since, that I've always tried to find, but I haven't been able to find it. But it was so awesome, his theme song, because it was very reflective of his character at the time. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this match.
The finish is Terry Funk trying to put the spinning toe hold on Ric Flair, and then Ric Flair cradles him to win the match. And then after the match is over, Great Muta comes out, and during the match, Jim Ross was saying, it's kind of interesting that Gary Hart's hasn't really done anything. He hasn't tried to create any chaos, but the Great Muta comes out after the match. They double team Flair. They're about to pile drive him through the chair again, but the referee, or no, it's Doug Dillinger, I think, jumps in, and you see certain people take bumps, and Ric Flair takes the most amazing bump in this match.
Yeah.
Just a normal flat bump, but it's like he has to sell just this move, and he just takes it so beautifully. And then you see someone like Doug Dillinger, and he gets hit, and just like a sack of shit just falls.
Yes.
But then, so some people would say old school psychology is you don't want the manager or you don't want the non-wrestler to actually take a wrestling bump because they shouldn't know how to do it because they're not actually wrestlers. So there's some of that. But yeah, Dillinger takes just like this just falls halfway out of the picture, just look bad.
Yes, I remember that.
Sting comes in and they clean house and they send Funk and Muta back. But the fight just keeps happening. Like these dudes just keep coming back. And so they're into the crowd. They're going into the crowd. Right. And then Jim Ross and Bob Caudle are like trying to do their little outro for the show. And
they're still fighting.
They're still fighting. And so finally Rick comes over and he's already been sprayed with mist. Oh, that's what it was. Flair took the back bump off the mist spray, where he took it like it was a sledgehammer hit him in the face. He took this bump so perfectly. So Flair's got the mist on the face, and he's cutting this promo, and JR's with him, and that's how you end the Great American Bash. Sting didn't really get to say anything. He's just kind of like Flair's second.
Well, he doesn't have to. He's a kid. Just follow along, kid. We'll get you here. You know?
Yeah. So that's how they ended the pay-per-view. But really good show. Even looking back, it's still a very
fun
very
show.
show.
The work rate might not be what it once was, but it's still a fun show. It's easy to get through. I know that you don't like Jimmy Ross, pantomiming or whatever you want to call it. But whenever you bring that up, I mean, Jesse Ventura was the worst. He was the worst at that, man, because Jesse would be like literally word for word, you know. But I guess what I was gonna ask you, and this is something I hadn't thought about. Maybe it was I got worked or whatever. So I guess this whole wrestling thing these promos have always been rehearsed, right? They have to be. Because for Jim Ross to know what Ric Flair's saying, like
I asked Dave this one time. So basically what Draven's talking about is Flair's cutting this promo and he's got to get a line in at the end. So the line is wear your Texas ass out. Like that's how Flair ends the promo. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so Ross, who's interviewing Flair, he's off to the side, but he's in enough of the picture that you could see his face. And as Flair is saying, wear your Texas ass out, Ross is mouthing those same words. So what I thought maybe is they had the cue cards and Rick was going to cut the Rick promo, but they wanted to make sure that he ended the promo with that line. So they gave him the cue cards. And maybe that's what Ross was reading.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I brought it up to Dave. He didn't remember anything.
But Bischoff also did it. Bischoff is known to do that as well. Like you said, he was the producer, so maybe that's why he did it. But that was a different era, and maybe at that point they were rehearsing promos. And then, but Jesse, man, I'm like, why the hell would Jesse know? But he would always. I'll try to find some clips and I'll send them to you.
Okay,
Jesse's
yeah,
very obvious, I'm like, dude, like you're saying everything. But yeah, I mean, we know that those Saturday Night's main event promos, because they were so pun heavy, they had to be rehearsed.
Yes,
they were not. If they were off the cuff,
I'm sure there were multiple takes of some of those because they were like pitch perfect. Like they didn't screw up anything in
right,
those.
right. But yeah, so that very good show. I love the Great American Bash '89.
You know what? The worst version of that actually made a show. Will Smith when he did the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, because he didn't know how to act, so he didn't know what how to do it or anything. So he learns the script by memorizing every single person's line. And if you go back to rewatch the very first episode of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the pilot episode, when they are speaking to him, he is also mouthing their lines. Like Uncle Phil is talking to him. You can see him mouthing Uncle Phil's lines. And so he talks about this. There was a HBO or a Max, whatever, documentary about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And he mentions this on the show. And then they have the clip of the pilot episode where he's doing this. So
but
I don't know why I never realized.
Did that make the air, or is that just an outtake?
It made the air. It was in the pilot.
I think it's on
weird.
Peacock. I think the entire Fresh Prince run is on Peacock. I gotta go check it out.
Okay.
Because I'm surprised they let that go through, because it's not live, so it would just be another take. But who knows? Maybe that was the best they got. Maybe in previous takes
he was so
really
bad.
But yeah.
All right, we have a super chat from Jay Boba. Do you guys see the Punk McIntyre feud ending in a double turn? Heel Punk for Mania season would be phenomenal.
I think CM Punk there comes a point for every wrestler, especially wrestlers that have credibility and that have put in their time in the business, like CM Punk has. I think there's no turning back for them sometimes when it comes to being baby faces, like John Cena, Ric Flair, etc. You know what? I don't want to say CM Punk's there yet. I think he could turn himself if he has the right program, but he's getting there. So if they're gonna do it, they got to do it soon, because there's gonna come a point where CM Punk's such a legend that he's not gonna be able to turn heel, especially because his promo skills always require him to be the cool heel anyway. Like he can't be that agitated heel. But to answer this question, I don't see it. I think McIntyre is doing a phenomenal job as a heel. He's amazing. I also don't see the sprinkles because see, this question would assume that we're starting to see the sprinkles of both, right? I don't see it. I still feel like people hate McIntyre and they love Punk. So maybe that's something Jay Bubba wants to see happen, which would be cool, but I don't see it happening.
I think in some people's opinions, Drew McIntyre is out promoting CM Punk. So in a sense that makes him a little bit more likable than normally a dastardly heel would be. And I can definitely see that. I mean, MJF in their feud called him PG Punk because CM Punk is not the same edgy guy that he was, and he's absolutely PG Punk right now in WWE. Like he's pandering hard to the fans. I sort of see him always as a bit of a dick, but I also know so much about him, like, you know, in the wrestling business, that biases my viewpoint of him a little bit. So even when I see him cut these promos where he's talking about, you know, meeting kids and, you know, oh, this guy, you know, this person flew several thousand miles from Jordan to see me. Like, to me, I'm like, he's just bragging, like he's like a babyface who is bragging. But to the fans, they're like, oh, you know, this guy's our superstar. So I have a little bit of a different view of him. I actually like Drew a lot more than I like Punk. But if you hear the reactions, CM Punk is doing a phenomenal job with this live crowd. I hate where the storyline turned. I hated the I didn't hate the match at the last PLE, but the spot where CM Punk has this dude in his finisher and he spots the bracelet on Seth Rollins' wrist,
right,
and he drops Drew McIntyre. You know, the 20 years ago Punk, or even the pipe bomb Punk, would be making fun of that same guy right now for doing that spot. And he did it, and now this blood feud has turned into a feud over, you know, a tchotchke or whatever. And I didn't like that. So they lost me in a sense, though. That is just my personal taste. For me to go, the business is going to drop off because of it. No way, because they're playing right into this casual fan base who loves goofy stuff like this, the romanticizing of certain things. And that's just my own. I've been worn down essentially because of what I do, that I can't really romanticize storylines anymore. It's just how I
a whole
see
other
them.
conversation. Dave does it all the time, bro. Come on.
Yeah, he watches wrestling way different than I do, though. He's
he's
the biggest wrestling fan of all time, I think. I don't think there's a bigger wrestling fan.
When it comes to work rate, he definitely is. He loves that stuff. Me and you were having this conversation off air, but I'm not gonna get into the details because I was trying to convince you to be more of a fan, etc. But I really love when Dave gets excited. Because especially when he's talking about Will Ospreay, you know, that's a big. He's a fan. He's a fan of Will. Let's be real about it. And so it just reminds me that it's okay, no matter how much, you know, dignity you have as a human being, no matter how much respect you have, it's okay to be mark out from time to time, you know, and so I do the same thing. Like when I go to a show, I'm in the show. Like, it doesn't matter, you know. And so to me, that doesn't, the whole CM Punk Drew McIntyre thing, it doesn't affect me. I understand where you're coming from. Like, you know, CM Punk the person. Like,
I don't know him, but I know
you don't know
things,
him, but
I know
things
that he's done.
Yeah, you know enough people that know him or whatnot. You have your connections that tell you, and I think. Yeah, he's very transparent, right? I mean, I think if you follow the business, you don't have to have any connections or know people. You know that he could be a bit of an asshole, and he has been many times over. But you're also saying that he's pandering to his audience, which is what a good booker and a good performance does, right? You pander to your audience so you get more out of them. So that's exactly what he's doing. Just like he did that same thing in AEW, which is a completely different audience, and it was a completely different character. In AEW,
I was at a show. I want to say it was like Rampage, he comes out to end the show. You remember how the old WWE house shows or after Raw where Austin and Rock would like sing songs and stuff?
Yeah.
This is Punk's version of that. Comes out after the show's over. In the ring with him, none other than a young man who went by the moniker of Jungle Boy.
Oh, wow.
Puts his arm around Jungle Boy, and he goes, if anybody has a problem with this kid, you are the problem. That's what he says.
So he's the problem then.
At this event, right? And he starts singing the Golden Girls theme song with the crowd. Like that was that version of the AEW Punk who was just so happy to be back in front of that live audience. And with Jungle Boy, who supposedly no one cannot like this guy because he's such a nice kid, but eventually then you put him in a guillotine.
And Samoa Joe comes and saves your life, essentially. Going back to the question, just to close it off here, I'm not really concerned about where McIntyre is going to stand or where Punk's going to stand. My biggest concern is where this feud is going to stand, because this feud is being devalued every week, it seems like, in my opinion anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Even the strap match, like, that's such a wacky Puerto Rican gimmick match. Like, this is a blood feud, and I don't know, I don't see a strap match. You know, it's a freaking strap match. I want these two guys to go in there and just beat the fuck out of each other.
I mean, we're probably getting to Hell in a Cell or something, right?
That's what I want. That's where it should culminate. Maybe even bring out the Blade if you want to go that route.
I think they have to if they go Hell in the Cell.
But at this point they don't have to, because this is being devalued every week. Like, to me, it's like it's not as serious as it was even a month ago.
Yeah,
you know, like I remember I used to give these guys so much credit because they were able to keep Rhea Ripley prevalent and also CM. Well, they were both hurt.
Yeah,
like, it's hard to do in wrestling, right? So the fact that they did that, I was like, man, Triple H is a great booker. But now it's like, you know what this reminds me of? Not the same thing, but it kind of reminds me of. It reminds me of the Bret Hart Vince McMahon feud going into WrestleMania 26.
That was sad.
Where every week it means less and less. When all you literally had to do was maybe run a video package of 97 and introduce the match, and that's it. Don't touch it at all.
Yeah.
But every week they messed it up even more. The CM Punk Drew McIntyre feud reminds me of the same thing. It was like it started off so grounded and so real. And every week it turns more and more into a cartoon, and it's like, I don't like it. And now we're gonna have a wacky strap match. You know, it's like, come on. But it is what they're still hot. So,
all right, I'm gonna give you 4 moments over the last 3 years. Over the last 6 years, where I got sucked into something. Okay, I'm gonna go all the way back.
Wow, I'm excited.
I'm gonna go I'm gonna go back to the very first Double or Nothing.
Show my wine.
Dustin Rhodes against Cody Rhodes.
Okay, I don't blame you.
I got sucked in to that match, and it didn't help that there were grown-ups crying, tears coming down in their eyes while we're watching this match, and I'm sitting next to my friend Carla Duran, Stitch Duran's daughter. The UFC cut man, and she's like crying, and she's pulling on my shirt because she loves the match so much. So that helped kind of get me in that mood. The other time would have been recently Austin when he came back at WrestleMania against Kevin Owens.
Wow,
I got sucked back into that. Like that felt like, you know, being a kid and watching wrestling again. Remember when Cody got hurt? And he had the torn pec.
Yeah, of course.
And he wrestled that match in the Hell in the Cell. That was another time. And the last one was actually this year. The Stinger's retirement. That's my favorite wrestling moment of the last few years.
Wow.
Just him retiring and the match that they had and him going out as the winner. So, yeah, you know, I get sucked in every once in a while.
You don't have ice running through your veins. That's good to know.
There's just tropey. I'm sure when you watch movies, well, you're a movie fanatic, but you're also a critic, and you could see certain tropes coming a mile away, and some of the audience who don't watch movies like you may fall hook, line, and sinker. And you're like, okay, I get it. Like that, I understand why that worked, but I saw that thing coming from a mile away. That's kind of how I see a lot of the wrestling stuff, and And so it's kind of hard to get out of that mindset when you're watching, because
I understand.
I'm watching so that I can talk about it, and you're thinking of points and you're thinking of like angles and okay, this means this and this is what I want. So I'm thinking of that when I'm watching a wrestling show. So
yeah, I think with me nowadays, it's more about just like the good promotion, right? Like I get excited when I see like a build up for a match, and it's like, oh shit, like they're doing everything they have to do, and it's and even when they give me a little more, like for example with Triple H, one of the things that's amazing about his run is that it seems like it's never gonna end, because he has these ways to, like, as soon as one angle's coming to a close, he's found a way to just start something new.
yeah.
Like, I give him all the credit in the world, because Damian Priest came out as a huge baby face in losing the title.
Yeah, he did.
And I'm like, this guy's 42 years old. Like, what the fuck? Like, he was a mid-carder like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so little things like that, as we see. I'm not a big fan of the bloodline angle. I think now we're starting to see that it reminds me of Memphis, where they would run these angles to the ground.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, I think they've done a horrible job with Solo Sikoa. Like, that guy doesn't have it at all. And it's not even their fault. It's just he doesn't have it. Let's be real about it. Sometimes you got to face the facts, and he doesn't have it. I think when Jacob Fatu came in, he just completely overshadowed him, right? And so now the money match is Roman versus Jacob Fatu. It's no longer Roman versus Solo Sikoa. And I think they blew off Roman versus Solo at this past SmackDown, because he essentially squashed them. It was like a maybe like a minute and a half match, and he speared him, and that was it. But we'll see where that goes.
Well, you know who ruined it as well? Cody, because he basically said, I'm the king of the bloodline rules match. So no longer can the bloodline call for their rules and get the match over, because Cody just said, I'm the king of that match. So they've kind of ruined that gimmick. But you know what they should do? Maybe they should still probably do Roman and Solo. And I'm really interested in watching the dynamic of Roman's character, not his facials, or more the in-ring stuff, because as a babyface, he's just going to naturally have to sell more, right? And so you're going to watch him sell more. You're going to watch him set up his comeback. So the style of his wrestling is actually going to be back to when he was a babyface, 5 years ago.
Right.
And I think because the fans are so hot for this product, and they think he's so cool, and he's kind of like their Cena now. He's their version of John Cena. I think it's going to work. But I am interested to see how long it's going to work. Cody has worked far longer than I thought he was going to work doing the character that he's doing. And Roman, now they have two guys who are over like that. And you got the John Cena retirement tour, and he's going to be crazy over. 2025 for WWE is going to be bonkers for business, just like this year.
What about people like Dominic and Liv? I mean, they're over huge. I mean, that entire storyline, Damian Priest is over. I mean, just Gunther is over. Like, I just love the way that Hunter has been able to maneuver all these pieces and just make them all make sense, And I know some of it is luck. I mean, with all bookers, some of it is luck, but not all of it. And so I think there's a lot of credit to him. And to me, that's my favorite kind of wrestling. You get the soap opera angle to it, and you get the work rate, because now WWF is very much into work rate as well, where you're never going to really get a bad pay-per-view. And so I don't know. I think TK has to catch up, man. He's got to catch up. He's got to give us more. I know Dave likes to defend them and say, well, they do give us storylines, but it's not the same thing. We don't got that week to week.
They throw storylines at the wall.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't stick.
Right.
And then even sometimes if they do stick, then you just don't see them for months. And so it's not the same.
It's not
the same kind of like the way that they remind you of what's going on, and then they take it inch by inch to the next level. But you know what's going to be part of the problem for WWE? And I brought this up to Dave not that long ago, and I don't think it's a problem, but it is something that he's going to have to be mindful of, is when you only have 5 or 6 matches on a show, every match is sort of built on a similar conflict, and thus you have to find 5 or 6 different ways to either further or resolve the conflict. And there's only so many ways that you can actually do this.
Right,
So
right.
there's a lot of repetition in WWE today, but they're able to do it because they are hot. But what's going to happen on stuff like the CM Punk and Drew McIntyre thing in another time, if this was a time when WWE was not hot and you do that angle to blow up this grudge match, the fans would actively be against it.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be right now because they love the product so much. So there are moments in time where some of the things that they're doing now may not work, but they're taking advantage of the opportunity. But they're also doing smart things like building up Braun Breaker during this time, stuff like that. On the NXT side, Trick Williams, building him up, getting him ready. You can kind of keep him in NXT because you don't need him on the main roster. 10 years ago, they may have seen his hotness on NXT and been like, we need more people like that on the main roster, and they would have shot him up too early. So they can take their time on stuff right now, which is really good.
Well, I'll tell you what, it does. Triple H could be the greatest booker in the world and all that, but I don't think nobody could ever get Karrion Kross over, brother. Because that guy, no matter how much they try with him, there's crickets whenever he comes out. It keeps on happening. They put him with Bobby Lashley, they put him with the New Day, and it's like
he is so bad that he has actually dulled his wife's character, who should be the most over woman in the company that is not a wrestler.
Scarlett, that's right. So that's I know we're running short on time. So that's what I got to say about current wrestling, modern wrestling. I feel very blessed, and I think all the wrestling fans should, because we're about to get, what is it, like 2 weekends in a row of just like Prime A wrestling. We got
All In and Bash in Berlin,
and then we got All Out. We got
All Out. Yeah, you're right. 3 weekends in a row.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And then we got Wednesday. Tomorrow we have the UK Dynamite, I should say.
Cardiff. Yep.
Cardiff, yeah. So it's cool. I mean, I love that stuff. I mean, that's I try to really just be grateful for what we have, because this is not always going to be guaranteed. So I'm looking forward to this next couple of weeks.
All right, let's hit the Only in the Observer section of this show, and I sent you the little video that I made for it. So this is going to work mostly for the people watching on video rather than listening on the actual audio podcast, but there's some audio as well. So let's set up this segment here.
How's it going, everybody? Dave Meltzer here. For the next 2 hours, we're going to be talking pro wrestling.
I love that.
That's from the Ayala show, right?
It's from the old school show
but you
25 years ago.
You edited out the Buffy the Vampire Slayer theme song,
I did. I thought about actually just having the Buffy the Vampire Slayer theme song, but I was a little worried that YouTube might grab it as copyright, because
is there a reason? Is he a fan of that, or they just gave him that?
That was Iyada's thing. I don't think that had anything
I always
to do with
thought he was a fan of that show, because it's like that's the theme song,
All right, I have 5 quick ones, and we'll get out of here. This one's a little grisly. I almost didn't put it in, but I just wanted people to understand kind of where we were in the time of wrestling. Dave writes, there is an independent wrestler working outlaw shows in Puerto Rico who dressed up like Jose Gonzalez and is using the ring name Murderer Number 1.
Wow. That is very dark.
And so, what's kind of interesting about that is AAA just had Triple Mania.
Yes.
And they had La Parka.
That's right. I saw that.
Out of a coffin. And La Parka has passed away. So they had someone dress up like a famous wrestler who is dead just for shits and giggles in a wrestling match.
Imagine that happening with one of the big two here in the United States. Like it would be the end. They would get crucified, But I was very insulted because I love lucha, as you know. I follow their podcast. I'm very much in that culture when it comes to the luchadors and that scene. And when I saw that, I was like, come on, like I don't know. I just found that very disrespectful. I don't even know how that even in that culture, I don't know how it made it through all the screening process.
So distasteful, yeah.
Yeah. I do like the closing angle, which we're not going to talk about here, but it was pretty cool. JBL got a payday from them, which was cool.
JBL got a payday. I saw Conan back on TV.
Well, he's been the booker for years, so yeah.
Yeah, but he was back in the ring.
They did, but they did the played out, at least here in America and over there too. They did the whole played out like heel authority. You know, it's like, come on, because Dorian is the owner, right? And
Yep.
he's kind of like the new heel authority figure. And I'm like, again, here we go with that. Like, come on, get with the times here.
And they put the title on Alberto Del Rio.
Alberto El Patron, another scumbag. But I mean, there's proof of that. I'm not going to say anything controversial.
Yeah,
he's a scumbag. But what other things do you have in the Observer? Wait a minute. Going back to that, I wonder if that wrestler was trying to take a shot at the person that murdered Bruiser Brody, or like, I mean, obviously he's exploiting it, which is not good.
Yeah.
But I wonder if in his own mind he's trying to get back at him. That's what I'm.
I mean, it's only a year later, I guess.
Yeah,
Brody died in '88, right?
Yeah. So it's horrible. So any way you look at it, it's horrible.
Titan will be placing WWF arcade video games in the lobby at the matches on the July 10th WWF house show at the Cow Palace, so the kids can play the games rather than to actually have to watch the wrestling matches.
I think they were trying to like figure out all the kinks to WrestleFest and stuff like that. You know? So I think Dave's overreacting a little bit. Maybe they just wanted to get some data, right? What are kids gonna gravitate towards?
Yeah, which wrestlers they pick? Who are the ones?
Right.
Yeah.
But Dave's always thinking about wrestling, so he's thinking.
Well, I mean, he loves taking shots at WWF whenever.
Of course, trust me, I know that.
All right, this one is more for me, just because this one hits home for me. But I did not know this before reading this. Did you see the item in the news where the secret location for Bill Walsh's tryout for the NBC color analyst job was at the Titan Sports Studios in Connecticut? So Bill Walsh in 1988 leads the 49ers to the Super Bowl. That would be his third Super Bowl win in 9 years or something like that. And he's kind of pressured by the owner to retire because he and the owner had their struggles, even though he was the genius, with what they called him. Just a lot of pressure, and just he was exhausted, I'm sure, but he probably did need to step away. So when he steps away from the 49ers, he now is like a top prospect for the football analyst job, in which he goes to NBC. And now Bill Walsh, very smart guy, very funny guy, a prankster, but because he's also the football professor, the personalities don't mesh perfectly when he's in this analyst role, because he's got to, be this way. But he did not end up doing that very long. He was soon thereafter head coach at Stanford. So,
but the fact that he had his, I guess, I don't know if a tape or audition at Titan Towers.
Titan Towers.
That's that's on the other side of the country. Like, why wouldn't you just go to like Candlestick Park and one of those?
Well, I'm sure it had something to do with just being near New York, is my guess.
Oh, okay, I see.
All right. Dave writes, this has nothing to do with Titan Sports, but Chris Von Erich will be making his pro debut for World Class before the end of the summer. I'm trying to think of what is a more thrilling prospect, Chris Von Erich as a wrestler, or Dino Bravo and Greg Valentine as a tag team.
That doesn't even make sense to me. Like, why? This had to be one of Dave's sleepless nights, right?
Yeah, he's had to take a shot. He's trying to make a joke, and that's the.
Yeah, it's like, why would they're not even comparable to each other? I mean, Chris Von Erich wasn't the best, but I mean, the Dream Team wasn't the worst either, But that's Dave for you. When he doesn't get any sleep, we gotta have that editing button ready to go at all times.
I mean, there are a bunch of people he could have taken a shot at. He's still writing Boris Zukov as Boris Zukov's name.
Yes. Anabolic Warrior, Junk Food Dog.
Well, the Junk Food Dog is out. See, he left NWA.
Is the Flabulous Moolah still around?
Jesus. The one I talked to him about not that long ago is, Rick Rude. Before Rick Rude went to WWF, he was always kind of wondering if Vince would like him, because Rick had an impressive physique, but he wasn't bulky. He was really thin.
Yeah.
And I asked Dave, like, not that long ago, I go, do you remember what you used to call Rick Rude? He's like, you mean Rick the Stick? I was like, yeah, that's exactly what you called him.
Yeah, Rick the Stick. I was hearing a show that you were doing with him, maybe a couple months ago, and he was saying that he wishes he could still do those jabs, but he can't anymore because nowadays,
comedy, yeah, he can't do comedy anymore.
Will go after him, and he was very frustrated because he was like, they're just jokes, like it's not nothing to that. But part of me is thankful he's not doing that anymore because it would just bring more headaches he doesn't need,
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, this time he was brutal, and you're right. He chose 2 random guys to like take a shot at. With 3 actually, if you count Chris. But yeah, we'll see. That was just Dave being Dave.
Yeah. All right, and this is the last one, and it is a correction from something that he had written previously. I
think I read this one.
He wrote that the Ultimate Warrior was having photos taken with kids, and they were charging kids to basically take a photo with the Warrior in the lobby at the Cow Palace. But then he writes a quick correction from the last time. I mentioned that they are having the Ultimate Warrior pose with kids in the lobby at the Cow Palace for $6, but actually Polaroid has gotten involved with Titan, and they let kids take pictures with an Ultimate Warrior cutout, and they're charging $6 to take a photo with a cardboard cutout of the Ultimate Warrior.
Man, what a work! That's a real work right there.
Jeez, Ultimate Warrior, if you're a wrestling fan, that's a good deal. $6, you get to take a picture with him.
But not with a cutout.
No, with the cutout, that's a giant rip.
I don't care how life size it is, But there again, people would pay, so you got to go with it.
Yeah, totally. All right, so All In, you're gonna watch, or you're not watching this live, are you?
I never watch Pepe. It's too early in the West Coast, man. Are you kidding me? And then with this heat we've been having, I gotta be out of the house.
Yeah, I'm having people over, so we're having breakfast and coffee and such, and
it starts at 9 in the morning, right?
The pay-per-view starts at 10. The pre-show starts at 8 on the West Coast, so they're doing a 2-hour pre-show.
Oh wow, they're like WWE now with their 3 hours of nothing.
Yeah, well, this one will probably have like 4 matches on the pre-show.
You know what? I gotta say something, because I don't watch these fucking shows because they're completely pointless, right? And I feel like death just watching them. But we gotta put over like Biggie Langston and what's the name of the new girl? She's pretty. What's her name? Redmond. Jackie Redmond.
Jackie Redmond.
Jackie Redmond. They, from what the little that I've seen, these horrendous pre-shows, right? Where it's like, you're talking about a work sport, like if it's a real, but they give it their all, and I gotta give them credit for that. Like they're out there, they're analyzing, and
they're modeling it after like the NFL pregame shows.
And I'm like, I'll never watch a show because again, they're so freaking boring and pointless. But I do give them credit for at least pretending, because
and it gives Big E something to do.
Yeah, but I'm the kind of person that if I would be there, I would be, my own head would be like, why are you doing this? Like, this is fucking stupid. And it would make me just kind of lose track of everything, That's just the way I like it's just pointless. And I see that, and they're so invested and so dialed in, which is a talent in itself. Anyways, I just wanted to put them over. But now you're saying AEW is going to do 2 hours too now.
Well, it's just going to be Renee Paquette and that RJ City guy. And I'm sure there will be others there, but they do theirs a little bit different.
Well, they usually have Jeff Jarrett as a third guy, but he's going to be in a match, I think. I think he's wrestling Hangman.
We'll see tomorrow on Wednesday. For people listening on the actual podcast, this will be up after Dynamite. But yeah, so we'll see that he's probably making at least 6 or 7 matches from Wednesday to Sunday. Yeah, and the other thing with Dynamite is Dynamite's got to be taped, because if they're running live in Cardiff, they got to.
They already taped it. They taped it last week.
Dynamite?
Oh no, not Dynamite. Rampage. I'm thinking Rampage.
Yeah. No, Dynamite. I think they're running Cardiff, and it's live.
You mean Collision? You mean Collision has to be taped?
No, Dynamite.
Okay.
So it's just because of the UK time difference, right? So it's like It's like, I mean, it's only taped a few hours in advance, but like when we watch Dynamite on Wednesday, it's not going to be a live show. We'll already know the spoilers of what happened.
Are they gonna do a Collision?
Yeah,
because it's a Sunday show.
Yeah, I think they're doing Collision.
So maybe they'll tape Collision on Wednesday with in Cardiff.
They might. I'm sure they should.
Yeah, because they haven't announced it. I don't think they're running a show on Saturday, so I think it is going to be taped, or maybe not. Who knows? I don't see them running 3 shows in the UK or whatever. But they were only. I mean, they're at 45K, right? So maybe.
I think the last I saw was 48. I think 48 something.
That's something we didn't even get to talk about. Like, why is he running more shows in stadiums? Like, what? How is Arlington gonna look? It's gonna be embarrassing.
I think they could possibly get to 20 at Arlington. I think it'll do okay, but they're gonna need a match. Yes. One is gonna be first ever stadium show in the US. The people who support AEW, they'll sell out that 8 to 10K.
That's a year away, right? In July, they said.
It's gonna be in August.
You know what? I'm gonna try to go to that.
I might try to go too.
I'm gonna try to go to that just for the wacky experience.
I just want to. I mean, I'm interested to go check out that park too. I mean, I won't be able to watch.
I was just there
baseball
this year,
game, but I would like.
I love that park.
Yeah. So, all right. We did a long show for a show that we thought was going to be.
It was fun
shorter.
though. I had a good time.
I always like doing this show. So, but we'll be back next month. And we'll have some thoughts on SummerSlam 1989, the second ever SummerSlam. Hopefully with no superstar Billy Graham announcing this time.
Oh, it was boring, man. Yeah. No, this is Tony Schiavone, one of his only rare pay-per-view appearances with WWF. So
there we go. See. All right. For Draven, I'm Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.